What is up, guys? Alien scientist here. And today is a super important day, just like my buddy Lou Angeles did with the big phone home. Today is a big phone home action day. It is another one of those big call-in days. This is important legislation being passed in our government right now, which will affect everything for the next 25 years. All right. Let's talk about this legislation and what's going on. I wrote a description below in the bottom with a script that you guys can call with. All right. So the action number down there for the main switchboard down for Congress down in D.C. is also in the thing down there. If you need, there's another link there where you can go and type in your zip code, and it will tell you. It will tell you where you are. Find your representative right here. And you click that, you put in your zip code. It will tell you who your rep is for your area, wherever you're registered to vote. Find out who that is, and make sure you get phone calls into your local rep, the congressman, and the senator. Okay, so these three people are important. I wrote to my local rep. He's a guy named Gabe Ammo. I'm not going to do that all online because it has all my personal info on there as you're broadcasting it. So I already did that. I already went and sent him, pretty much a variation of the script that's in this video description below. And I already sent that to my rep. I'm going to call Congress here. I need to call them, and I don't have my phone. I was planning to call them. I should have just waited and went and got my phone because I need to get a hold of Mark too. I can go run and get that while I play a video real quick, maybe. This was Danny Sheehan on Paradigm Institute, of the New Paradigm Institute. He was on a podcast last night. That podcast UFO live shows was the YouTube channel. And this was streamed last night. A lot of interesting stuff in that hour and 40 minutes, if you can go back and listen through that. But this is super important. Some of the things he talks about, because he's starting to read through this legislation, and Danny's the man at being able to dissect all that legal jargon and figure out what's going on and what these bills mean and all that stuff. So the way he's broken it down is basically this. He's saying that this guy Chuck Schumer, all right, Chuck Schumer is trying to pass this Schumer amendment. And basically, that's going to be the UFO cover-up extraordinaire. All right, if Schumer amendment passes, the government's going to be able to keep all this stuff secret for the next 25 years. And by stuff, what are we talking about here? Well, we're talking about our Top Gun military pilots. Top highly trained military professionals are seeing UFOs out there. They're seeing craft that are flying around in our skies that are completely unexplainable with normal physics and with normal aviation. And these guys are experts. They're familiar with everything that's flying out there. So the stuff that they've seen is not. They're convinced it's extraterrestrial. So I'm not so convinced. I think that we need action and investigations into all this. And the government's just put up a stone wall, and they're like, oh, UFOs, and this is a non-issue. And then there's people saying that this is a distraction from other more important bills or more important, legislation or real world issues. I'll tell you what, there's nothing more real than an 80-year-long cover-up of the truth. There's nothing more real than the government saying that your children and you all are too stupid and to have access to this information and these answers. There's nothing more tyrannical than a government that wastes trillions of dollars. We are talking about missing trillions of dollars that are just completely gone and unaccounted for from the Pentagon budget. And where are those funds? And why are Top Gun pilots seeing UFOs flying around? What did that money? What did those missing trillions go to pay for? And are these in fact classified aerospace programs? We just found out about aerospace projects from the 1950s that our government has been doing advanced anti-gravity research since the 50s, and that's come out. So we know that research didn't stop in the 1950s. What kind of technology do we have out there? We've talked to a lot of the professionals and experts on these things with on altpropulsion.com. You can check out our website. I would advise you to link your senators and congressmen there if they're looking for more information. We have a ton of people that have worked inside of these programs who've come forward, and we're always looking for more insiders or people that can talk. There's a lot of people that are still under NDA, people that work we've known about that we've covered that we can't talk to or interview because their work is still classified. It's still going on in NASA and DARPA and other classified research programs. So we've done what we can to try to dig into this as much as possible, talk to theoretical physicists on all different sides of the fence, all different types of, we had Salvatore Pais on, the U.S. Navy inventor, very recently interviewing him. So we're doing killer scientific disclosure work to try to bring these technologies out of the shadows and into the limelight as much as possible. And it's a lot of this is being overshadowed by these UFO secrecy, all this stuff that's going on with the government. I mean, this is pretty serious stuff. If you want your, the way I put it in to my congressman is that my kids could either grow up to be in a 1984 world, where they can be their options of a future career path are being Winston Smith. If the Schumer amendment passes and the government's just allowed to keep all this technology and all this trillions of dollars of money that they've embezzled and spent on who knows what secret for the next 25 years, I can tell you what, the only option my kids are going to have for a future is to be Winston Smith, because you're basically in a society where the government is the only one who has access to information and technology, and that people are basically proles and slaves to a big oligarchy or machine type of government. And that's basically what you're dooming all of our future generations to if you go with the Schumer amendment and pass this. However, if this technology is declassified, my kid could grow up to become Captain Picard of the USS Enterprise someday, right? So I really would much rather, my kids and my grandkids grow up to have a future like Star Trek than one like 1984. So it's very, 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 very important that you make some time today to call and encourage everyone else. Please, please call your senators, call the government today. Our entire future is in your hands. And we can do so much more for the future of goddamn humanity and your children and everyone else than a government that just keeps secrets and says, oh, we can keep all this stuff classified and you don't get anything. And it's going to take 25 years for this to all trickle drop out. And eventually, by after 25 years, then, the government could admit that, we had a contact with ETs, decades ago, and we kept it classified and secret because we were afraid and we wanted to keep control. Right. So that's it, man. That's basically what it boils down to. I'm glad that all of you guys are here. You guys are the real legends, and you can make legendary history today, right now. And all it's about is just picking up that phone and reading that description right there in the let's read through the script real quick, right? This is what I wrote. Tell me what you guys think of this, right? So, dear local government representatives, trillions of dollars have gone unaccounted for or missing from the federal budget, while highly trained Top Gun pilots are reporting UFOs flying around which exhibit flight capabilities beyond anything currently in our known weapons arsenals. These unaccounted for black budget deficits, combined with unbridled advances in aerospace technology, pose a serious threat to the American national security state and our very freedom as American citizens. If these craft are advanced aerospace technologies from our own government, the public deserves to know the truth. If these craft are advanced enemy weapons capabilities, the public deserves to know the truth. And finally, if these craft are extraterrestrial visitors, God forbid, the public also deserves to know that truth. Chuck Schumer is attempting to pass legislation which will allow the government to keep all its UFO files classified for the next 25 years. Tim Burchett, the congressman from Tennessee, is one of the few people fighting the government for actual answers. The American people deserve to know the truth, and we deserve answers. We do not deserve to be kept in the dark for another 25 years about something that the Pentagon has called a serious aerial threat in the past, while they continue to spend over budget. Please support Tim Burchett, support UFO disclosure, and support the truth. Help us shoot down this Schumer amendment and not let big government keep pulling the wool over our eyes while the UFOs fly around our skies. That would not be wise. Thank you for your time, and we'll be watching this issue very closely. If you help Big Brother Schumer pass this draconian bill, you'll be clipping our children's wings from a future they deserve today. Technology that could transform humanity will be classified for another 25 years. And I can promise you, if that happens, I will tell everyone in my work, my family, and my YouTube channel and Twitter network to vote you out of office next election. This is the most important issue of our time, bar none. Our children could grow up to become Captain Picard of the USS Enterprise, or they could grow up to be Winston Smith in a 1984 police state. I hope you decide to force the government to release the UFO file. And if you're curious what types of technology might be in that file, check out Alien Scientist on YouTube and Twitter X. Thanks again for your time and your concern for the future of humanity. And yeah, that's it, man. I didn't mean to leave that one up. Schumer bill in 25 years, dude. Another Schumer bill in 25 years for disclosure. I've talked to Gary Nolan on Twitter, but I have no affiliation or relationship with any of those people. But it's way too much secrecy, man. It is, do not let Schumer hide the files. Okay. It's kind of crazy how it couldn't be more obvious that who's doing the cover up and where it's coming from when the three people opposing this bill, all right, are from Rachel, Nevada, where Area 51 is, Dayton, Ohio, okay, that's where Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is, where the Roswell debris was brought, and Schenectady, Schenectady, New York, which I still don't know everything that goes on there, but it's got to be something cool. If Eric Weinstein posted that on Twitter. So Eric Weinstein pointed that out, that the three people opposing the bill are from the states with the biggest top secret UFO kind of stuff going on. Oh, I have a very awesome guest, guys. I want to bring in someone I have a much respect for. He's waiting in the back room right now. This is John Warner. John Warner, thank you so much for being here. It's standing with Americans. So, have you taken any position on this disclosure?
Yes, I'm sorry. I've got audio of you playing in the background, and I don't know where it's coming from.
All right. Well, I'll give you a minute to go find that window and that tab and close it. Rachel, Nevada, John. So, John Warner is he's a John. I forget. You're like Chris Mellon's cousin or something like that, right? And
yeah, we're third cousins. We used to be friends. I mean, we're at odds now. But I want to make something clear, because on Joe Rogan, when Grush did his interview, he mentioned Paul Mellon. That's my grandfather. Chris's grandfather is William Larimer Mellon, who was a businessman and philanthropist. So it's obvious, a lot of confusion going on. But that's the clarity of it.
Right. And I've seen you a few times on Dark Journalist before, some interviews you've given on there. And I've seen you also just a few times here and there around the community. So I want to explain what's the difference between, your position and some of the, and Chris Mellon's position. Like Chris Mellon's like saying, he said a lot of stuff about, national security being the reason for why we can't declassify a lot of this stuff. And I just want to know where you stand on that. Do you think we should have full disclosure, or do you think there should be, 25-year time period to get all this out? Immediate release of everything. Where do you stand on that?
Well, it's a lot of stuff. So I think the 25-year plan isn't a bad one. The problem is Chris Mellon came out recently at the Paris Echo conference. They did, he and Avi Loeb, I think, did an interview with a European TV crew. And Chris said, the world may never be ready for disclosure, which I think is a terrible statement. The world is never going to be ready for disclosure. We have to just get it done. Unfortunately, it doesn't, whatever the truth is, the whole thing, our history, the politics, all the wars, megalithic constructions, pre-Diluvian civilizations, all that stuff wrapped into it. Foo Fighters, World War II, the embargo, and what's happening now. It's a lot. So I've tried my best over my lifetime to sort of piece it all together. Given my experiences and my travels with my dad when he was in the Senate, and he and Chris worked together in the Intel committee. So, it's the kind of thing where Chris Mellon and his folks, Avi Loeb and Gary Nolan and everybody sort of connected to that operation. They've got some good points, but they're also, no one elected them to be these patriarchal sort of, gatekeeper demigods, as I wrote it on Twitter. They did this with Project Blue Book, but a lot of people are too young to remember. They did a lot of lip service, and this gets us into Tim Burchett and Congress now. At the Grush hearing in June, Tim Burchett, he makes a big deal about, we want disclosure and all this stuff. And, but he also came out and said, well, little green men and flying saucer, and everyone laughed. And to me and Dark Journalists and Greer and some others, we talked about it, it's like he's signaling his bosses above him, his undying loyalty. And Grush sort of sat there and I don't know, but my impression is they were all on the same page.
Yeah, it's even weirder because Jeremy Corbell sat there and kept the Pentagon pose with his hands for the entire 2 hours. He sat there and held the Pentagon in his hands there. Like, who's he signaling to there? It was kind of, he's allowed right there front and center in the hearing. I know I got to go to the Senate hearing back in, was it July? I think July or June. No, it was March, maybe. It was earlier this year. I went to the Senate hearing down there, and we got there early and waited in line, and there wasn't nearly as many people as I guess showed up for the Congressional hearing there, where Grush and Fravor and Graves testified. But I haven't actually read the entire thing, but I'm just, because I'm not a lawyer, which is why I rely on, people like Daniel Sheehan and others to sort of, do that stuff and figure it out for me. And but as far as I'm concerned, Danny Sheehan had said there in the interview, he mentioned Richard Dolan's book, which is, some good documentation on the whole national security state and disclosure and all this. But so much of this goes so deep into the deep state. If you really get into the rabbit hole of the research, you start learning, oh, wow, the Carlyle Group bought out EG&G right after 9/11. And so, EG&G is the top contractor for Area 51. So all this sort of technology and stuff has gone into, these certain hands of these organizations, which, represent, just pure military industrial complex conquest.
Well, a lot of it's like the Russian nesting dolls. So they consolidate things. That's standard procedure for a lot of that throughout history, military contractors, high technology. But, and I talked to Daniel Sheehan after the Greer press conference in June, and he and I agreed on a bunch of stuff. And one thing, this is just my opinion, but my dad told me a long time ago, we would watch CNN together when I was a young man in my 20s and 30s, and we would discuss politics. And he's like, you see all this dog and pony show they're doing about this topic? Well, what they do is when they have a very sensitive topic, and the UFO ET file is the most sensitive topic ever, they'll do a big show and dance, press conferences, hearings, passing bills and amendments, and doing something, to give the illusion that they're really doing something about the issue. And then all of a sudden, after a few months or maybe a year or something, a new crisis comes along, and all that stuff melts away, and the topic is buried. So I think that's what they're doing now with this Schumer bill and other things. They're talking a lot, but saying very little. And if the Schumer bill passes, well, then that's just another in a million bills that keeps national security, ironclad, and everything else. They
That's
call
an interesting take on
every
it.
damn topic that has anything to do with the UFO ET file, whether it's a contractor corporation doing business in one country or another, or the pilot said this and that. Well, there's obviously all these factions within the deep state. Some want more disclosure, some want status quo, none. And so we're seeing the fruits of that now. But I'm not holding my breath. This is going to go on for the next 30 years.
It just seems kind of staged how, that they got these hearings. The people I thought they were gonna have 40 whistleblowers, and it was gonna be all these people, and then it's just Graves, Fravor, and Grush up there, and that's it. And it seems like it just feels to me like it's there's so much more, when under the hood of this, the Disclosure Project had like 200 something witnesses when that came out in 2001. And I just feel like there's so many more people that just can't talk or won't, and that they could bring out, because this topic goes into so much technologies, so much classified research with science and whatnot, and all that stuff's been sort of swept under the rug. And the best scientific evidence that is being presented to Congress is literally Jeremy Corbell's bokeh triangles and flare drops videos.
No,
and that just seems to me like, there's a hidden hand of like counterintelligence, being like, all right, we're going to put, all this crap out there so people get burned out and exhausted by this giant mess that's going on. When in reality, like there's just, we have terabytes of papers and physics.
Well, they don't want to see any of that.
Yeah, I know.
I tend to think that George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell, they're kind of suspiciously part of the Melanin Company, operation. That's my view. I know Dark Journalist feels that way, Greer, others that we've had in private conversations. I had a conversation with John L. Peterson, and you can look him up. He's an old Pentagon insider. My dad knew him. He's about 80 now. We had a discussion. I said, I don't think this is going anywhere. What are your thoughts? And he said he had been in 2 Pentagon meetings, one in the early 90s. And he said in the early 90s, there were 50 people around a table. And thank you. And they said, well, all right, what is disclosure going to look like? And they had 40 different operations that could come out. Well, only 5 out of the 40 didn't involve, an upheaval or a French Revolution and, people taken to the streets. And John L. Peterson told me a few months ago in our meeting, he said, I had a recent meeting 2 years ago and Mellon was there, Elizondo, a bunch of these people with the rest of the Pentagon folks. And I said, John, I'll bet you those 5 options are now gone. And he's like, I'm afraid they are. So That was a very sobering conversation. But no one in Congress or the military-industrial complex or the corporations or the intelligence community or anything, disclosure is there's no upside for them.
Well, this is the thing that bothers me about.
There's no upside for them. Tim Burchett, making a big, he's talking about some interesting topics. I'll give him that. But it's kind of like they want some disclosure, but they don't really want it. So what is that? The public is left confused. I don't blame them. I don't blame anyone for being confused. It's insane. But it's, if you look back over the 80 years, all the things that have been done, it's like they talk about it and they talk about it and they talk about it, and nothing solid ever really gets done. They want to continue to bury it, release a little steam pressure.
Yeah.
And then close the valve, release a little bit, close the valve. And so,
it seems to be the strategy. They just like put on this show and pretend like they get stuff done. Like the thing I'm worried about is in the 90s, I think there was some kind of bill with the JFK Disclosure Act, and they agreed to, the deadline for that came and went. You know what I mean? They were supposed to release all the files in the next over 25 years after the 90s. And the end date for that came and went. There's still JFK files classified to this day. So we don't have the truth about JFK or what even happened in that assassination.
You're never going to get it.
Because I know that's what it's looking like. And if we're never going to get that, then what makes people think that the UFO disclosure is going to be any different if they're going to say, oh,
because they're
25
linked.
years. It's a game of kick the can.
Right, because they're linked. JFK, the word is he was going to share some of our UFO file with the Soviets because all these lights dancing around military installations and ships and things, they didn't want to start World War III thinking it's the other side. In World War II, the Foo Fighters, all sides thought they were the others, but they weren't. But we were already at war. But during Kennedy's, we had the Cuban Missile Crisis, so they didn't want that to happen. But of course, the Russians had their own, they knew all about it anyway. Kennedy was a little naive on that, but the Germans, aerospace scientists, and LBJ and Alan Dulles, and my grandfather Paul Mellon worked with Alan Dulles in the OSS on Project Paperclip in World War II. So forget it. We're never going to get it from the government. Everyone's like, oh, the government's going to give us the truth. No, the CIA just gives you reams of paper that's been redacted. They just talk about it. They don't give us anything because they can't. And this goes into another theory of mine that the Mellon and Company operation, they do want some disclosure going, but they can't really do it because they've signed government and military contracts, and those all have severe national security clauses in them. I don't care if you're a private first class or a 4-star general. And so, but they're kind of poking us with sharp sticks and saying, you guys do it because we can't. So they're trying to make people angry and frustrated at an accelerated rate because disclosure is going to have to come from the American people, at least our basket of stuff. And that's what I see is happening. They're not going to give us squat.
No.
They never have and they never will. It's too damaging, the dirty laundry, drugs, trillions missing, I don't know, horrifying things like in the Greer show, the guy talked about human trafficking and drugs by.
Oh yeah, well the whole thing with Epstein and then Bill Gates.
I've heard that for 25 years.
And to think that Epstein's the only one because someone took over for Ghislaine Maxwell.
Yeah, it's horrifying.
Horrifying.
And,
what these elites are doing.
I hate that.
I understand why people think they're aliens who eat babies underground.
Yeah, I mean, the stories are legion, but the drug thing I think is true. Definitely, human trafficking is the biggest moneymaker in the world. Number 2 is drugs. Number 3, weapons sales. So those things are in the mix because they generate huge amounts of cash for the deep state and the black USAP programs. Unfortunately, but a lot of these people in the deep state, they're compartmentalized, and so they don't know where the money's coming from. Everyone's like, oh, the government. And it's like the government is this huge entity. And it doesn't cover the deep state big boys in the back room that are in round tables like the CFR, Trilateral. Hey, and it's like you can't just say the government. It's like, which government?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
there's
exactly.
like
And
3 or
then
4 of them.
there's secret governments. There's the
facts.
continuity of government program. There's Northcom. There's a backup government if the government gets taken out. There's all this other,
It's insane. You know, it just boggles your mind. And they kind of know that. And when this goes on for the next 30 years, you know, it'll confuse the hell out of the public more than ever. And I don't blame people for being confused.
yeah.
Even after 50 years of this shit, I'm still confused at somebody. It's like, why? Why now? What
Yeah.
is their
Why,
impetus on the
why do
inside?
we have 27 different intelligence agencies?
Yeah, or more.
I have an answer to that, and it's a little speculative. It comes from some of the, the woohoo stories about UFOs. There were treaties signed with extraterrestrials, and in those there were timelines. X amount of years, something needs to happen, and you'll get X goodies. So one of those things that needs to happen is general disclosure that humanity knows what's going on. These extraterrestrials are in contact with us. They're watching our TV. They're on YouTube. They're on Twitter. They know what's going on here. They know, how far disclosure has gone along, and they want to have open dialogue with humanity. They don't like what's going on with this breakaway civilization. And so there's two factions. There's two factions. One faction is trying to bring disclosure out for various reasons. And there's another faction that's just set in their old ways. And right now, this amendment to the 2024 Defense Authorization Act, it has been passed through Congress, but it needs to go to the Senate now. So it's gone through the House of Representatives, and they're trying to put amendments onto it, redact the teeth, basically, because they were supposed to be given the right to subpoena people. There was also something in there about any government agency or subcontractor that would include Lockheed Martin, Skunk Works, and Northrop Grumman that has these materials on hand. It would basically claim eminent domain on them and take it away from them. And that's something that they're fighting right now. After it's already been passed by the House of Representatives, they're trying to get in there in the Senate in order to have that stuff removed. And they have senators that are basically paid off by these government contractors. And this is a pivotal moment in history. If we don't have the teeth in that bill, there's not going to be another bill like it. Now is the moment.
I think this is our only chance. I don't think we're going to get as much support for, public support for UFO disclosure or any of this stuff as we have right now.
I don't think you're going to get government support either, really. This bill and the eminent domain, these are technicalities.
But they're very important technicalities.
Oh, no, I agree. You have a good point. It's very well said. But man, my experience with government, they bury this shit in minutia.
Yeah, my experience with government is they want your kids to grow up to be Winston Smith. They do not want your kids to grow up to be Captain Picard. Right.
Schumer and everybody, these are boys on the take. They're all bought and paid for. My dad said, everyone's bought and paid for before they're elected. Corporates, special interests, and military. That's why he aligned himself with the Navy and the Marines, because they had his back.
Hey,
what he's trying to do with contract corporations, that was his deal. But man, the Schumer bill, they're going to try to bury this. But disclosure's got to come from the American people. It's never going to come from the U.S. government. They're too compromised. I'd love to see that. I'd love to have Burchett being true blue, but he's too convenient all of a sudden. I was telling Jeremy about, the hearing with Grush. He said, "Oh, shucks, little green men and flying saucers." And everyone laughed. And so the meeting was turned into a farce.
The funny thing is, there are no little green aliens. They're little gray aliens.
Yeah, they're probably every color in the rainbow, but yeah, I agree.
The little green has never been found, actually. I don't know any anyone who's ever come in contact with a little.
I don't know anyone who's ever
One
come out
person,
with any
one
aliens.
person said that what we know is the grays. There's 1,000 species of them, and they're like brown, black, green, red. You know, that's just one person's. I think it was Alex Collier or something. But anyway,
Yeah, and Clifford Stone. He's
yeah.
one of the most wildest disclosure project witnesses out there.
Guys, reaching out to Congress at this point is
that's the most important thing.
The most important.
It's good press for the disclosure arena because they're talking about it. All good. All press is good, and whether it's they bury it or not, whatever they do now, it's going to cause more interest and more reaction. If they bury it and say, "Oh, it's nothing," go back to work, go back to school, stop asking questions, that's going to trigger interest. Or if they talk about it more, that's going to trigger interest. So it's all good in a sense. It's good press.
What do you think? What do you think of my script there for the call? And would you change anything or add anything? I mean, I kind of was a little harsh at the end, basically threatening to, get them unelected, but I feel like
that won't help. It won't help because, it's like everyone's like, throw the bums out and elect new guys. And those guys are all compromised before they're even elected.
True. I've seen a lot of that.
Politics is dirty, man. It's all, trust me, I learned it firsthand. It's dirty. You got to make compromises. And my dad said the only thing that gets done is when they used to have parties in Georgetown in DC where the grand dames would say, "Okay, boys, into the library and don't come out until you agree on something." And they would get drunk and smoke. And then at 5 a.m, they'd come out and agree on something. Well, that's gone. But my dad said it's the little meetings that he has in his office or even at his home, where he lived. Those are the things. That's how things get done away from the public eye and everything, because you can't just do it and argue in the Senate or for something. There's a million factions in Congress. It's really difficult to get anything solid done. And this subject, holy shit, it's the mother of all third rails. It's deadly. People have died over bringing forth information.
Yes, yeah. And we've been threatened before. We're just a lab going at it our own way.
There they are now. Get him, Pinky.
Oh, yeah.
At this point, the dog should run for Congress. Vote for him.
Yeah, so it's important. I think it's still important for people to call in and voice these opinions to the people in your government. Let them know that you are out there, that this is an issue that means a lot to you, even if it really doesn't look like much is going to be done. And you're right, John. If we continue with what we're doing with APEC and the Alt Propulsion Conference and bringing scientific whistleblowers out of the community and into the public eye, I think that disclosure is going to happen through that avenue. That was sort of why we set this all up, is because I saw all these paths towards disclosure. Getting the government to admit to anything is just a failed mission.
They will never admit.
Yeah, they will never. You see what's going on with JFK. We are 60 years later, and
it's by default. It's their stonewalling is very telling, and so to the public, they're like, "Wait a minute, they're not telling us squat," And it's like, good. Go figure out why they're not telling us squat. And so it's like, their disclosure is probably going to happen by default. It's just going to be public whistleblowers, scientists, military people, and people writing their congressman or senator and saying, "What the hell? Come on, you guys have been sitting on this for 80 years, enough." And all this pressure is like a train's boiler. I wrote this on Twitter. It's like the steam train's going up a hill and the hill's getting steeper. And they keep throwing more coal and water in there, but the boiler's going to explode because it's so steep and the wheels are spinning. They're spinning their wheels now. You ever seen a street?
It's inevitable. But one thing that's really nice about this amendment is its bipartisanship. There is no disclosure party. There's Republicans, Democrats, centrists, hard. We had AOC was at the hearing with Grush. Me and Jeremy actually went down to one of the earlier ones and met with what was her name? Kristen Gillibrand.
Gillibrand.
And Jeremy Reese actually got to her and started name dropping. One of the things was Battelle Memorial Institute, which a couple months later actually came out as being one of the places where the bodies are stored. But one thing she really took away from that, it was very important that we went, because we took up about half the seats at the place, and most of the seats were empty. And we got with Christian Gillibrand afterward and just explained to her how important this is. This is the most important thing you'll ever do in your entire career. And she seemed to believe it, at least somewhat, because it's an exciting story. It has a little bit of a kook factor to it. And that's important. That was part of the cover-up. The kook factor was how they kept it secret for so long. There were lots of people who came forward and talked about this, both from the government and military-industrial complex, but they were just blown away as kooks.
Yeah, it's like Tim Burchett and his very attractive sidekick. I forgot her name. Sorry,
Luna.
only on my first cup of coffee. What's her name?
Gillibrand. Yeah, Kirsten
Gillibrand.
Gillibrand.
The attractive
Luna.
Luna.
Yeah.
Oh.
Always remember the words. That means moon.
Attractive.
Latin. So, yeah. Most senators and congressmen and representatives, if there's a hot button topic that can bring the limelight their way, you better believe it. But this is also the third rail, but it's the brightest light we've had since, I don't know, the Gulf War or WMDs or something. It's the biggest issue in human history because it is our history. And so they're like, well, I really want to touch that third rail and get the spotlight, but I'm a little afraid. But I think more and more of those people are becoming interested, even if they're threatened by some of the old timers saying, you better keep your mouth shut and vote my way or you're done. Because a powerful senator, I'm reminded of Strom Thurmond. My dad's like, nobody fucks with Strom Thurmond. If you cross him, he can ruin your next election. That's the kind of power these people have because of Strom's deep state connections. There are those kinds of people that are very powerful. And in government, sometimes they're in the limelight and sometimes they're in the shadows. But it's like when I talked to Admiral Bobby Ray Inman in my dad's office in the 90s, I was always, I knew a lot about the Navy and I traveled with my dad, really loved the Navy and the Marines. And he said, oh, we're hopeful about bringing out a lot of new technology for the betterment of humanity. This is like 96 or something. And of course, we got 2001, which a lot of people believe was a warning, no, you will not do those kinds of things. And then there was this, odd story about Podesta and Hillary Clinton sort of waffling on disclosure, and they coined UAP, and then everything became muddy and cloudy, and again, so it's very suspicious. But there's a lot of people that are here. I think they have good intentions, but they're hamstrung.
Right.
Well, with a baseball bat at the knees if they go over a certain line. And I think this is, to be fair, with Chris Mellon and Elizondo and all these people, they're trying to do something. They brought a dead topic alive in 2017 worldwide. I sent Chris a message. I said, I'm proud of you for that, but I disagree with the way you're doing it. And you're eschewing all the dark stuff. And okay, bad news. Nobody wants to hear bad news and stuff like that. But at least they're doing something. But remember, their hands are tied to a certain degree. And that's why I think they're provoking the civilian component of this and say, come on, guys, help us out. I know, and I've been.
I had a lot of hope for them with the scientific disclosure, and they had the whole science division. Then they were going to bring some stuff forward. They claimed that they were going to bring technology out and a bunch of that stuff. I heard some things. I had some other thoughts on that as well. That it was just a front and maybe a psyop or something. I've also heard some things from some of the people inside that group behind the scenes about what happened behind the scenes and how it all fell through for TTSA. namely with Tom's inability to get serious and really, bring it together with around some of these DoD people. But in any case, what 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 I try to do then is say, like, well, if they're not going to bring this out, someone needs to, and there needs to be some kind of organization for this, and I've been sort of on this mission myself for a while now, and that's when it became clear to me that the only way to get this technology, the only way to get disclosure is to force it out through the technology, because if you can demonstrate and show the technology. If I could show anti-gravity in Mark's lab, Mark can show anti-gravity working in his lab. We don't need to wait for the government to come out and admit to anything, because it's already there. It's already.
That's the default thing. Is it just organically? It already is happening. Tic Tacs. Right. That's Lockheed Martin. Come on. They've already leaked that out. It's like. Happening
well, here are these rumors that they're doing it already. So it's like if Lockheed Martin's doing this, like, why can't a guy in his garage in New Jersey?
Well, guys, I mean, no offense, I love everyone, but it's like most people are distracted. They're watching football and soccer and movies, and they're trying to make a paycheck and get their family fed. And I mean, this is very complicated stuff. If Lockheed Martin came out with an anti-gravity, let's just say they made the Tic Tac mainstream. Hey, CNN.
Yeah, rolled it out like the B2.
All right, cool. About time. And then it's back to football, soccer, and go to work. It's piecing this together. Hey, where do you think they got that technology from? They're like, well, our engineers are very good. And they've been back engineering stuff for 75 years. You're damn right they're good. In the early days, I heard it took 15, 20 years for the microchip to be developed from one of the chips in a UFO crash. I think it was Corona. That was tough. But today, you get an advanced piece of gear from ET. They come down, they hand you the keys to their UFO and say, what do we get? And, some CIA guy says, here's a warehouse, take anything you want. And I'll leave it up to your imaginations what's in that giant warehouse. And I mean everything. From chocolate to nylons to, a Tesla, if you want it, to the darker stuff. And so, we get a gizmo. Our guys can back engineer it in 1 year now. That's how good we are. You guys know that. You're engineers.
We could.
I want to let people know about Tucker Carlson did an interview. It's about 20 minutes long. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but he did an interview with Tim Burchett. Just recently. And,
that's really good.
This was really, really good. Definitely have to go watch this, and definitely people should go check this out. I'll post the link right here on Twitter to where people can go check that out on Twitter. Follow me, alien_scientist at Twitter, at alien_scientist. And also follow Tupacabra, who's here as well. Welcome to the show, brother.
And, hey, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, go for sure. One thing, hold on. One thing I want to finish before. Never mind, I lost it. Go ahead.
Oh, my apologies, Jeremy.
I was just going to say that Tim Burchett. Michael Schumer reposted this and was basically like, calling it all bull, BS. Saying that this is bullshit on, he reposted this and I reposted it on Twitter and I basically was like, it's real BS is like that there's trillions of dollars missing from the Pentagon's budget, just unaccounted for. And that pilots are seeing UFOs flying around and whose are they? And we don't have answers. That's BS.
Well, it wasn't wasted. Those trillions, they're building a secret space program and they do all kinds of programs. So the money goes to a lot of military stuff. And who knows? I mean, Ben Rich of Lockheed Martin said, not only can we take ET home, but we're interstellar. And that's a direct quote from Ben Rich. So
is that one? I thought that was like Jim Goodall or something. It's someone, because I always try to find the clip of him saying that, and there's no clip of him actually saying it, man.
John, I don't know how far you are into the woo, but there are accounts from people who claim to have been in these 20 and back programs where they say that they were taken interstellar to other planets and other solar systems and are fighting other civilizations' wars. And so this breakaway space faring race of humanity is literally getting us involved in extraterrestrial warfare. That could have serious repercussions.
I think so. I've talked to a lot of these people over the years. People like Penny Bradley and Elena Kaputnik and others. And they're no crazier than the rest of us. They really aren't. They're very smart people. The whole SSP narrative, my opinion is it's incredibly complex. Politics, warfare, ET races, polarity, metaphysics, the occult stuff wrapped in there, artificial intelligence, the gamut. And my question to people who say, oh, it's all bullshit, that's number one, that sounds like 40 years ago when the Roswell thing was big in the 80s, and everyone said, oh, you guys are crazy Roswell tinfoil hats. Gee whiz. Now they're saying the same things about, Alex Collier and all these people today. Okay, well, what do they all get in the same room and get on the same script with all this complex information about our history and fighting in space and other civilizations? That would be very difficult to do. That's
I want to say something, John.
I ignore information. It's information, and my philosophy is consider everything, and then see if the dots connect. And some of them do. The military stuff. I have some military contacts here in DC that are retired, and CIA, DIA, and my O&I friend, and they're like, well, I can't tell you a whole lot, but Star Wars and Star Trek, and they'll do that. And it's
They're
like
documentaries.
So, make of that what you will. But it's something we should consider. These people are highly ignored on Twitter and other platforms. And it's like, why? Is it because their narrative is very scary and horrific? Yes, it is. That doesn't mean we should ignore it on that basis. What? The UFO tinfoil hats are calling another group crazy? That's oxymoron.
Tinfoil hats at our lab are actually PPE. This is made out of silver, covers your whole head and body. If you don't wear it while this equipment is on, you'll get a headache.
Yeah. I believe it. It's like a Faraday effect.
Yeah, it's a Faraday. It's basically a Faraday cage. It protects you from the RF. When you get into millimeter or higher band microwaves, can affect your brain and stuff.
Yeah. You guys are working on anti-gravity issues?
Yeah, that's what we do here primarily. So tinfoil hat people were the people who were driving into that, realized they needed a tinfoil hat in order to survive, their own lab environment. And that somehow got switched into making fun of them, when in reality, those are the people we should have been taking seriously.
Well, there you go. Everything is twisted to make fun of anyone who believes in this whole narrative. Because, like I said, the general public is overstressed around the world, trying to feed their families, trying to make a buck, trying to survive and watching football. And we're inundated. In the 1960s, we had 5 TV channels and some movies. And you go to watch sports on the radio, and that was it. Now it's 1 million channels, 1 million video games, 1 million everything. Technologies. Elon Musk he's his own entertainment company. Musk is, goes bust. Musk throws a tirade. He's a big distraction. Holy cow.
And we're trying to get back to Mars.
Yeah, with chemical rockets.
And if things go crazy, they declare martial law.
Yeah. Yeah. You could do it with chemical rockets, but 2 years in space will degrade the bones of the astronauts. They've proven that. Unless they come out with Tesla gravity plating and Tesla anti-gravity all of a sudden, and Tesla black box and the spaceship that protects them from micrometeorites, gamma radiation, and the like. Gee whiz, I wonder where he got that stuff.
What do you guys know?
Industrial complex.
What do y'all know about Daniel Sheehan, Lou Elizondo's lawyer? I've heard that he has actually been involved in writing parts of Senate Bill 2226.
That's the word. I've talked to him. I've met him twice. He's a nice guy. He's very smart.
And
I disagree with him on Elizondo, but that was the only thing we disagreed on.
Supposedly his organization is named in that legislation as being one of the people that can make recommendations for this 9-person panel. The president is supposed to appoint 9 people to this panel that's going to do the controlled disclosure.
Maybe, but I doubt it. Yeah, they'll control it with an iron lid and a welding torch. Seal it up. Danny means well. He knows a lot of big players. I appreciate his work. I don't know why he defended Elizondo so much. Elizondo, from my O&I people, they were like, "Oh man, we know Lou. Stay away from him and don't believe a word out of his mouth. He's the best. He's a counterintelligence expert." And Chris Mellon is a spook. And, my dad worked with him on the secret committee, MAGIC, Majority for Joint Intelligence Committee. But be advised, if you try to find information on it, they change these acronyms every year. Look how many acronyms we have now: ARROW, ATIP, UAP Task Force. There's a paper I wrote to Jack Sarfati's forum. It's a private email forum. And I listed all of them. And there's still more today since I wrote it, 6 months ago.
Blue Book, Grudge.
Go call UAP Task Force. Oh, you can't get the Senate Intel Committee representative? Call ARROW. And around and around and around you go until you wear out and get tired. That's our government.
That's right. Is Sheehan still representing Elizondo, or does he have a new lawyer now?
I don't know.
And was Sheehan also representing Greer at one point too?
Oh yes, they're very good friends. That's where I saw Danny was at the Greer press conference in June. We had a private talk about all this, and it's sobering, some of the things that there are. I think the Mellon faction with Gary Nolan and everybody, Travis Taylor, they're very worried about Greer because, in Danny's words, Greer's playing with dynamite next to a hydrogen bomb, and then they're worried about that. And then there's another faction that approached Danny, and I met a couple of these sort of spooky people, and they were in their 70s, and they're like, Greer's not going far enough. We don't need people out there telling us all this good stuff and then saying, "Oh, ETs are all angels and positive," and they're vibrant. That's a dangerous message. And I split with Greer on that. I said, Stephen, my God, we live in a duality universe. Everything, yin and yang, spin it, everything's gray. And
it's like
ETs told me they're all benevolent. I said, fuck, that sounds like a line of shit.
Yeah.
From some regressive asshole out there. Ooh, Stephen, I got angel wings. Here you go. And we're all benevolent. We're all behind you. That sounds like bullshit. You ask the SFP people, they're like, don't trust ET. Law of discernment. That comes from Hermetic law of discernment. It's tricky business. Angels and demons. Ooh, on your shoulder.
I just posted a video of Carla Turner. She gave a list of 10 facts about alien abduction that she had come up against. I don't know if you guys know who Carla Turner is. She passed away in 96, I believe. And in 95, she gave a talk at the MUFON symposium. And yeah, like most of the things on the top 10 list were that they were liars. Whatever these beings are, whatever they're doing, they're lying. The stuff never really comes true. And they're interested in all kinds of stuff, including the human soul. I thought that was super fascinating. But yeah, the deceptive nature of this phenomenon is kind of like well known. And for anyone to kind of take it and then run with any one narrative of it and assume it's all bad or all good. Yeah, I agree, John. There's more of a duality here. It seems like it's going to be more complex than that.
People like easy black and white answers most of the time. And there's none of that in our universe. Everything's gray. There's no white hats. There's no black hats, no good and evil. It's all perspective. And so it's like, the people I deal with who are ex-spooks or military, they're not proud of some of the things they were involved with. It was part of their duty. But, some of it was a choice because, well, they got paid more. And they're like, well, now I'm really guilty of it. And I said, no, don't feel guilty. We're all wrapped up in this shit. If you vote for somebody and they're part of the deep state black hat crowd, well, you're connected to that. We're all in this, shit soup together, everyone around the world. And it's like, oh no, I'm a farmer in the Yucatan, I'm not involved. Yes, you are. If you vote for a local magistrate and he works for somebody else in Mexico City, and we're all connected to this. And so energetically and otherwise. So it's like, a lot of people are sitting on the sidelines. Some of my friends, my Harvard, Yale friends, like I have a federal judge friend. And he's like, I'm sure you're right, Warner, but I don't want to know. Ignorance is bliss. I'm like, the bliss is only temporary, pal. You're not going to legislate yourself out of that. And he's like, I got too much on my plate.
Yeah, if they could have a more realistic timeline, a reasonable timeline, because what happened, I don't want to see what happened with the JFK files where they said, oh, we're going to 25 years and everything's going to be declassified. And then that deadline, that 25-year date comes and goes. And then also you need funding means and, to make sure that the people who are getting paid for declassification are, being paid for that. But that's not to say that someone who won't try to pay them not to declassify stuff from the outside, because I'm sure that the people who want this stuff who don't want this stuff out there are willing to pay more than our government could possibly provide in funding. So it's
that's right. Well, let's look at Bobby Ray Inman again. Where did he go to work after he got out of the Navy? SAIC. And then a military, private military company, and others. These people are put on boards, and you could be a general officer or you can be a lower officer, but you're put on boards, and they pay you a lot to do very little, and it's mostly just hush money. But you're doing something for them so they can pay you a lot of money. I'm sure Bobby Ray Inman was paid millions. He was top dog. He was MJ1 in the 90s, 80s, and 90s. He was the top man.
What is SAIC? What do they work on UFO stuff?
They're Scientific Applications International Corporation. They came out in about like the late 1960s. Very little is known about what they did during those decades. In '95, I know that they emerged as part of the Stargate program with the CIA to study remote viewing for the CIA. So SAIC was did one of the whole remote viewing studies for the CIA. That was 1995, and then a couple years later, they actually made a fortune selling airport scanners after 9/11. So they made tons and tons of money off of 9/11. And Dwayne Andrews, the CEO of SAIC during that time, was very good friends with Donald Rumsfeld. As well. Many interesting connections to SAIC. The SAIC is now Leidos Corporation, and Leidos Corporation makes all the airport scanners at all international airports that you have to go through in order to get on planes. And it's interesting. Their vice president right now is a guy named Barry W. McDaniel. He was the head of security at the World Trade Centers on 9/11. He ran security for Securicom Stratesec at the towers on 9/11, and he's now the vice president at Leidos. So if you can't get more connected to the deep state than SAIC,
they build technology for government agencies.
They're given a lot of back engineered ET items, technologies, like Raytheon does, and Los Alamos Labs. And you name it. I've got a list of hundreds of military contractors, GM, General Motors. I mean, and it's varying levels of security, but I guarantee you SAIC is probably in the top 10 as far as security clearance. I know Halliburton.
Right here, this piece came from Los Alamos.
What's that?
Yeah, this piece of equipment, Los Alamos.
Oh, wow. Beware the ghost in the machine. Does machina.
It all goes to. It didn't come directly. It went to a second deal a secondary place that's a distributor of like old equipment from Los Alamos, Sandia, all the national labs out in New Mexico and stuff. They'll get rid of all their stuff through the supplier, and me and Mark found them, and we use them as one of our top order. Anytime we need obscure equipment for any of these experiments, we're basically buying it off of them, and running the same experiments that they're still classified from 20 years ago when they used this equipment to run them the first time, and we're pretty much reproducing a lot of those experiments.
Yeah, I mean, I'll defer to Mark and his company. You can show the public. Let's say we got on CNN, all of us here, and we said, look, we made this technology work. We can make, I don't know, a Tesla hover, and everyone would be like, oh, that's really cool. And then they would just, next up would be, politics, and today they were comparing Nixon to one of the candidates today. And I'm like, why? It's just fluff and junk and garbage and distraction. America, you go to Europe. I was in Rome recently with my wife. Hardly any politics on the TV, European or otherwise. A little, but it was, meaty stuff.
And they have boobs. They show boobs over there.
Nonsense, fluff.
Like nudity is like completely okay.
Donald Trump today, was cruising in a sailboat, and it's like, okay, the hell? Why is that important? They keep the public fed with junk food TV and news. That's long been known. Media.
John, earlier you mentioned Star Trek, right? And we have a lot of, how important do you think the media and some of these sci-fi like stories are to getting these ideas out? Is the system borrowing from sci-fi writers and futurists, or is there some fair amount of like dissemination of information through these channels?
That's an interesting question.
It's both.
It's both.
I'll tell you what I know, because I'm a Star Trek fan. I remember the original series. That's how old I am, 61. My dad and I watched it in the fall of 66 when it came on. And he was like, what's this garbage? Turn that shit off. He was right. He called it the idiot box. He was right back then. The story is Gene Roddenberry, who was a World War II bomber pilot, was an impressive guy, super smart. He was friends with another producer in Hollywood named Leslie Stevens Jr. Now, Leslie Stevens Jr. did Battlestar Galactica in the 1970s. Well, guess who Leslie Stevens Jr. father was? Admiral Leslie Stevens. And the word is that the Admiral, through his son and meeting Gene Roddenberry, he's like, you should come up with some sort of TV show that the United States Navy can disseminate some of this information. Yes, some stuff is just sci-fi, but some of it, is the real deal. Galactic federations, warp speed, extra dimensional, planes of existence, 12 dimensions of the universe, blah, blah, blah. And Gene Roddenberry seeded it because the original series, is always going to be the best. It was so ahead of its time. I mean, I admit it, until I was 11 years old, I had no idea what was going on. I was like, attack the Klingons, forget all this politics, and then I started to get it. It was a bunch of morality plays, and no one could believe how successful it became in the 70s with the conferences. I've never been to one. I wish I had. And I think it's because it was so ahead of its time, and it had to have the 1970s for people to digest it. And it was on, I remember in high school in 1980, it was on 3 times a day on 3 different channels for a while. That's how popular it was. And we've grown up a lot since then with movies and Alien and, new Star Trek, Star Wars, and all that stuff. And Star Wars is very violent. I mean, Star Wars, it's fascism against the rebels. I mean, they talk about slavery, and they talk about, all these things, galactic councils, how politics fails and planets get blown up to shards. What are they telling us? I think there's a lot of important information. That's why Chris Millen, who said recently, he said, oh, humanity's not ready for disclosure. Humanity was ready in the 70s.
Yeah, I think that's true. We were more ready. I think it's
a baseball bat to the issue, kneecapping it. Oh, the public's not ready. But we'll tell you when you are ready. It's horrible.
It's that the elites aren't ready, and they want to they know that they're going to lose a certain degree of their control over all this if they let it out.
Are you kidding? I know a lot of these wealthy people, the Koch brothers, you know, the Crimea 300 families. I know Rockefellers and DuPonts, and, you know, all these people. They have no idea what's going on. They're not in fear of anything. The 5% who are read in, either financially or the deep state or militarily or in politics, they're concerned. The rest of them just talk about tennis and which private jet is better than the next, you know, when to visit the south of France. I mean, nothing. I mean, that's why, you know, I got divorced, and my wife and all her highfalutin rich friends, including my cousins, some melons, they talk about nothing all day long. They dress up in coat and tie and talk about nothing. I was like, forget it. This is not for me. I've been a black sheep all my life. So was my mother. She was a mystic, a hippie. My grandfather hated that. You know, this is, you know, my dad lied to me over and over and over again. He told me some truth. Did a lot of nodding and, okay, yeah, maybe. You know, he did that, but he never broke his security oath. Not really. You know, except for that one time he was drunk. And I said, Operation Deep Freeze Antarctica. Come on, man, what is it? And he's like, space operations. And I was 14. I didn't know anything. And then I read Nick Cook's book in 2002, and I was like, holy shit. This is what my grandfather was talking about. This is what my dad was talking about. You know, my grandfather was in OSS, and he was talking about, you know, being with Patton and Alan Dulles in Czechoslovakia. I think it's Pilsen at the Skoda works, and that's where the SSE-4 division is. I recommend everyone to read the new book on Hans Kammler and Nick Cook's book, The Hunt for Zero Point, and Igor Wachowski's book on the Wunderwaffe, the German wonder weapons program.
Yeah, Hunt for Zero Point.
Reading. You know?
It's really crazy how all those programs kind of got enveloped into the U.S. secret space program at Redstone Arsenal, and
the Germans had tons of it,
and all that stuff's still classified.
Yeah, it's always going to be classified. You know, there's a story I believe that Werner von Braun said, "Where do you want, you know, part of the NASA headquarters?" He said, "I want it in Alabama, because the people there know what a caste system is all about. And the Germans hated minorities. That's one. There's other reasons, Redstone Arsenal, others, but that was one of the. They were like, we're not going to do it. You know, we need to do it in the South where everyone knows their damn place in society. Of course, that changed in the '60s, much to their chagrin. But and they all drove Mercedes on a standard NASA salary. All the Germans, big line of them. And in the late 50s, early 60s, they were just as expensive as today, but even more rare. And so all the NASA, you know, military folks, they're driving Chevys, Fords, and Chryslers, and they're looking at all these Mercedes parked in a special spot, and they're like, "Fuck these guys." You know, I mean, it's all public. A lot of this is public record, but nobody cares. Nobody wants to get together.
I was there at Redstone Arsenal. I drove through the neighborhoods where they still live to this day.
Yeah. Von Braun Avenue and all that. These guys were SS guys. They were heartless fascists. But, you know, trying to piece all this together and present it to the public, my analogy was, you know, unloading a container ship into a rowboat. And I stick with that. It's just like, holy shit. There's such a small minority of us that really can piece all this together. And I'm like, that's very depressing.
I know it's sad. It's like there's only a few people in our entire society who have the time and the knowledge and the capacity to be able to like assemble all this stuff and tell people like, wow, like, you know, we figured stuff out.
What is everyone's opinion as to why? I'd like to hear that.
A lot of times it's, you know, we're all at different points in our life. There's very few people that have all the skills and the resources available to them to do all that. I think it's most people are, you know, can't even take the time out of their normal life to watch a podcast like this, let alone, you know, put on a podcast like this and do all the research that goes behind, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, God.
Yeah, it's difficult for.
Well, this is a very specific kind of challenge. You know, it's like there's a difference between looking at a mountain you have to move and all you have is a shovel and a bucket, you know. But this is a different type of challenge. You don't see the mountain. You have no idea where this trail ends. You have to like go at it, and then just a lot of times you're alone. Sometimes you pass people along, you know what I mean? But you're just going, and that's not really something for everybody. You know, you start peeling back the layers, and things that you thought were normal or things that you thought were, you know, were one way turn out to be a different way. A lot of people can't handle that kind of revelation multiple times in their life, you know, let alone doing it on purpose to themselves, right? Just to kind of figure out a little bit more, you know. So I think a lot of people just really, they have fun with it here and there as a hobby, but when you want to dive like really deep into it, most people are just happy to get the narrative handed to them through, you know, through Netflix or whatever. Like, you know, that's just the way people are. Like, we're storytellers, but we also listen to stories. So
I could talk at it from the science perspective, and I found this very interesting. There's very few people that really dove deep into the science, but when I find those people, I go on other tangents with them, spiritual ones, talking about all different topics. These are people that dive into a subject to the deference of everything else. They just dive into it and try to find the end of it. And once they find the end of it, they're done with it. But the anti-gravity and the UFO story is so vast and so large and so exciting. They dive into it, and there's never an end. It just keeps on getting deeper and bigger. And what we're doing over here at Falcon Space in New Jersey is something that isn't even the opportunity of a lifetime. This is the opportunity of a civilization, because you cannot have disclosure twice. Disclosure can only happen once in a civilization, and that's something that we're going through right now. And this is a very exciting time in human history. I wouldn't want to be alive at any other time in human history than right now. That's how exciting this is. And what's happening in Congress needs to be pushed forward. It's extremely important that we get all that teeth that was in the legislation that Schumer put forward. It's very important that that's there, because if that tiny minutia, not being able to subpoena them, not being able to go after the hardware, those kind of things, if they're not there, the cover-up will continue.
Yeah, I think that those key things are important. I think it's good to everyone too to just bring this to attention, because it shouldn't be just Timber Chat and just Kirsten Gillibrand pushing for this. And you should call your senators, call your congressmen. The numbers are in the description in the video below, and just let them know that I gave a sample script. If you want to read off my script, if you want to change it, add your own stuff, feel free to. But again, it's about letting them know that this issue is important. It's important to you, and it's important to all of humanity, and it should be important to them. And that if they're going to go against this and basically vote with the men in black and, you know, the reptilian alien Illuminati overlords or whatever have you, then we're not going to vote for them again, and they're not going to get our support. And we want this type of totalitarian people in our government out. And you know, the only way to get this kind of thing out in the open is through you know, public support and public messaging. We also should, I think people should be calling up their, you know, news channels and be like, hey, you know, like, you guys should, you know, do more about this. And I understand you can't, you know, talk straight about the technology and let stuff out of the bag, but at least, you know, talk to more people, take this more seriously, because I feel like they're almost like trying to do this public ridicule and burn people out on the topic, so that we forget about it for another 50 years and we don't have.
Well, that'll never work. You know, Joseph P. Farrell said it best, and he said, you know, the deep state and the black hats and people in Congress, you know, they want to own all the narrative, but they never will. That's what I think. Another possibility of this whole congressional brouhaha with, you know, the UAP hearings and UAP task force and, you know, Mellon and Elizondo being public for 6 years. It might be an attempt to try to grab the rest of the narrative and say, see, we're talking about it. We found hardly anything. It's a threat, whatever it is. It's a mystery. That's a lie. And don't worry about it. We got it under control. And they create more departments in the Pentagon. And it's like, oh yeah, we took care of that one UFO who was, stealing spinach out of the farmer's, plot. And don't worry about it. And try to sweep it under the rug further and further and further. But people are starting to lift up the rug from all sides. Eventually, they're going to get to that middle pile of dust, and it's not going to be pretty. So they're trying all kinds of things, as they usually do. What sticks to the wall? And they're like, get Burchett out, get Millen and his boys out, and get Gary Nolan on CNN. Get Ross Coulthard to cover it all as the world's best journalist, on the UFO thing. No, these people were handpicked, groomed, paid well, probably.
I don't know.
Doing this for free?
I go back and forth on.
I disagree. I think Burchett has his heart in it, and they don't control the narrative that much. They are throwing some shit at the wall, and they are controlling a lot of people, but they don't control everyone.
No.
Who do you think has the most control over the narrative right now?
Jeremy Reese. Stephen Greer has been.
No one.
No, man, we don't. Hey, I watched David Wilcox get 12,000, 20,000 people watching live, man. We barely break 500 on our best day. So yeah. I don't have. I mean, we're definitely giving them a run for their money with their ability to control the narrative, with the information that we're putting out, the guests that we're bringing on, and the perspectives and intelligence that we put forward. So it's definitely a resounding echo can be heard throughout the YouTube and Twitter community for what we're putting out there. And we just need to keep at it, I think.
True.
The grassroots, I don't have a lot of followers on Twitter. I'm very suspect. I mean, when they mentioned my grandfather on the Grush interview on Rogan, that was like, see, Warner's part of our operation. And everyone, I got like 30 whatever messages and said, I knew you son of a bitch. I knew you were all part of it all from the beginning. And it's like, I don't blame them for thinking that at all. It's like, I knew my wife and I and my dad and I, we discussed it years ago. Should I come forward publicly and start talking about our family and granddad and everything? And my dad was like, well, you're in for a shitstorm because you're part of it. Everyone's going to yell Illuminati and they're going to point to the Mellons and Rockefellers and DuPonts. And you're part of that. I said, I know, but I can't stay silent either. My father raised me with a very tough moral and ethical center. And he had that. He had to waffle on a lot of things and he lied about some things. But, national security, that's a get out of lying jail free card. They just bandy that about and you can get away with murder, literally. And so it's kind of like, I don't have any credibility really if you dig into me enough. And he's part of them. And then who's Greer? And Greer has suspicious financial backers and nobody knows who they are. And and everyone's janky. I mean, everyone in the disclosure movement, we all are. And it's like, who has credibility? Who's controlling the narrative? And it's like no one. A lot of people on Twitter love Elizondo and Mellon and Gary Nolan and the whole UAP task force crowd.
Right.
Because their message isn't scary compared to the rest of us saying, well, this is a possibility that we're out in the galaxy fighting. That's like bringing Star Wars alive. And so people demonize, they're like, you're nuts. You're an idiot, and stuff like that. And so, but that's been going on since 75 years in the 50s when these UFO guys did conferences and wrote books or were on television interviews. Imagine the pushback they got back then from a conservative America and very religious America. I can't even imagine. And yet they still did it because, out there, I'm convinced everyone's watching. They've been watching. They've been interacting with Earth for billions of years. We're just a footnote. That's interesting. The human race, weird genetics. They're still weird. But, they're recording it because there's a lot of shit going on down here, a lot of war and violence and atomic weapons. And I'm sure all of you guys have heard, Oppenheimer famously said, he quoted the Vedic text from the Mahabharata. He said, I have become death, the destroyer of worlds, plural. And that he knew that atomic weapons were cutting through the third, fourth, and fifth dimension and killing people we cannot see. And that hydrogen bombs yielded much more in practice than on paper. And they were like, where's that extra energy coming from? And Oppenheimer knew it was coming from higher dimensions. So all the hydrogen bomb experiments must have killed a lot of people in those dimensions too. I mean, these are the kinds of things that give you great pause. We are definitely 5-year-old children playing with gasoline, dynamite, and tactical nukes. 5-year-olds.
And we set off hundreds of those things, right? We set off a lot of.
Oh, the Russians, forget it. We don't even know how many the Russians did. I'm sure somebody knows. They did a Tsar bomb in the 70s.
The Tsar bomb was crazy.
Holy, yeah, that must have cut in maybe the 6th dimension. Holy cow.
And they said that was a scaled down version of a larger bomb that they had planned.
Oh, knowing the Russians, they always build things really big.
On that note, atomic weapons splitting the atom, violently destroying it, that is nuclear energy. What we're doing over here at Falcon Space is the opposite, but
implosion.
No, we're not doing implosion. We're orienting subatomic particle spins.
Right.
We're trying, instead of destroying the atom, we're trying to make it nice. We're trying to calm it down and orient it. That's where I think the secret of anti-gravity comes from. That's how these craft are able to get rid of their inertial mass, because instead of exciting everything up, they're doing that. They're calming it down. They're cooling it down. And that's probably one of the ways that they were able to keep this secret for so long, because they categorize it as an atomic technology, and the Atomic Energy Commission has the right to keep things secret on a much higher level than anyone else is able to obtain. That's one of
the 1954 Act on Atomic Energy that covered
UFOs. When this came out, all of my science papers, 1953, 1954, they're gone. I literally have science papers right here from 1953. That's when all of this came out. The latest textbook on dynamic nuclear orientation, and it all references all this pre-1954 papers, was from 1963. That's the latest textbook you could find on the subject.
Yeah,
because all this stuff is related and cross-pollinated.
Yep.
Anti-gravity tech, nuclear energy, 0 point.
Nailed it there. That's right. The Atomic Energy Commission, 1954. That's when it was silenced.
Right, and that's why Oppenheimer was kicked out, because he was too much of a liberal on it. We need to share this with humanity, and they were like, no, you're not. They took his clearance away and demonized him as a commie, and all that usual stuff. And this is what I wrote that letter to the forum. I posted it on my Twitter site. It's like, even if Elon Musk, Greer's trying to sue the U.S. government over this, that's folly. You're never going to get anywhere suing the man. They own the law. They own Congress, the deep state. They own all of us. They own everything.
They own the judge, the jury. They own the courtroom.
With technicalities and suing the U.S. government and trying to do this legally. No, they play dirty. We're going to have to play dirty too. The disclosure movement, all of us. What is that? 3 or 5 million people worldwide, growing maybe a little bit.
It's growing.
You're not going to get anywhere playing by the rules. And this is sort of an aside, but I feel like some of these benevolent ETs, they're like, we're rooting for you. You guys have to do it. And it's like, well, our hands are tied and our feet is in cement. We got a gun to our head. And they're like, yeah, but you can do it. And I'm like, this is suggesting to me that even though you're sixth dimension coming down here, you're naive as to what's going on down here in the streets. Go look at Hamas and Israel fighting each other. You're giving us all this impractical cosmic advice. And it doesn't mean shit down here. They're correct. We need to do it ourselves, obviously. But it's like, how? When the deep state owns everything and they have all the wealth and the power and the law and the military, and it's going to take cracks everywhere, which I believe we're seeing some of that in the last 10 years, but still it's sobering. I mean, thanks ET, thank you. But screw you. That it's dumb advice. It's impractical advice. What, are we all going to get together and, do a mass prayer? Okay, that might help. Good luck. We're all hate each other through religion.
Oh, I think the aliens can help with that, because the aliens started those religions.
The regressive ones, they don't play by the cosmic law. They don't, the rules, they're like, the rules, you candy asses, go to hell. And they just do whatever they want. But the benevolence play by the rules. They say, well, we want to help you, but it's the law of non-intervention, the law of balance, the law of, of everything, in hermetic law, that's cosmic law, I think. And it's like, well, thanks, but
how is that law
down in cosmic history is a fucking failure. The human race.
How is that law written? The Prime Directive in Star Trek. What's
the law of non-intervention? Yeah.
But what's the governing factor?
Who's governing out there? I'm not even.
The governing factor of what I mean is, what needs to happen for that law to be no longer applicable is for that civilization to have reached warp drive.
Let's take a very crude analogy. If Captain Cook in 1750 or so, 1760, he went around the world to Tahiti and all these islands. Well, let's just say for giggles, he had 10,000 flintlock muskets and tons of ball and powder and small arms and stuff. And he started arming certain groups, because there was a dominant group that was going to all the islands and subjugating them under one king. And he said, here, let's arm the little groups quietly, to restore the balance of power. Now, whether or not that's been happening in secret, I don't know. I've been looking for evidence of it, and it's like, well, they've given the Americans a shit ton of technology, but who's in charge? Black hats. There's a few gray hats in there, and they're like, go out through the UFO dog and pony show and call it a UAP and a phenomena, and my favorite, an anomaly, to keep it watered down and vacuous. And it's nebulous. And so I don't know. Have they given us the tools to break ourselves away from regressive? The regressives, maybe, but it seems like all the bad guys are in charge of everything.
And this year we were finally able to hold a legitimate hearing in July with credible witnesses who testified under oath to what they'd seen and experienced. The hearing this year faced a lot of pushback from the intelligence community, members of Congress, and of course our friends at the Pentagon. The intelligence community shut down an amendment I tried to include in the FAA reauthorization bill. And basically, it would just require the Federal Aviation Administration to report UAP sightings by commercial pilots to Congress. I was told by the whip that bill was killed by the intelligence community, and I corrected him and I said, you mean the intelligence committee? And he said, no, the intelligence community. And as they say, when you're over the target, that's when you get the most fire. And it would just, like I said, it would just require the FAA administration to report UAP sightings by commercial pilots to Congress. Again, they spend a whole hell of a lot of time and effort and money to tell us something exists that does not exist. And so, fortunately, another amendment I introduced this year, it was to increase transparency. And honestly, this is what this whole issue is about. It's about transparency. On the issue was included in this year's NDAA Act. It required the Department of Defense to declassify any documents and records relating to publicly known sightings of UAPs or UFOs that do not compromise the national security of the United States. It all comes down to one word, and that word is transparency. I've been briefed on things I can't talk about in public because it's considered classified. But why are we classifying so much about this, especially if the information doesn't jeopardize national security and we have departments telling us that they do not exist? We are here today to discuss that. I've got several other notes, but I'll skip over them because I know y'all probably want to hear from the folks behind me. We had some great witnesses, as I stated before, but these folks want to talk about more of the transparency and some of the pushback we're receiving from those aforementioned groups. And with that, I'll turn it over to my dear friend, Representative Luna, the mother of Henry. And if you get to see this kid, you got to see this kid. He's spectacular. Thank you all so much.
thank you all for being here today. It is unacceptable that any mid-level unelected bureaucrat staffers can tell members of Congress that access information about UAPs. Let me be clear that we are the representatives of the elected, or that of people that sent us here to do the right thing. Unelected bureaucrats do not get to say what we can and cannot see. We've had 3-star generals tell us that we did not have authorized access to this information. But yet, how do you expect us to continue to send taxpayer money to fund government projects if you're not even allowing us to see what those projects are? And I say that because, as some of you know, we have been consistently hearing that we do not have the authorized clearances, again, by people not elected to office. Let me repeat this. The people's representatives, members of Congress who sit on judiciary, armed services, and the oversight committees are being denied access to this information. But if we do not have the clearance, who does? Does this sound like a truly free country? Referencing Grush, I know there was many questions in regards to what was happening with his current IG report and whether or not we were able to receive access to that information. We were previously denied this. We have now received permission from him directly to go back into the SCIF to review that information. But in my short time in office, it has become very clear and evident that there is an apparent an orchestrated attempt to deny us this access, and it appears that that is coming from the intelligence community. We have a rampant overclassification problem. We need the UAP Disclosure Act, which I would ask that if you see to my left, you have Representative Burchett's language, and it should be added. As we know, we do not want to go forward with fake promises to the American people. I'd also like to speak on the issue that some members have stonewalled our efforts to get transparency, and this is also unacceptable. No one member is above another, and the American people deserve to know as much about the existence in this universe as possible. They certainly have a right to know about whether or not if their safety is threatened, and most especially when it comes to our men and women defending us in the skies. This is a simple answer. Stop barring us from the truth.
Good morning, good afternoon, I should say now. So I'm happy to be here with the folks that have really been talking about this since the beginning of Congress. This is not something that I thought I would get involved in when I first came to Congress. But quite frankly, the reason why I got involved is as we started asking questions, legitimate questions, the pushback we got is what interests me. Every time we pulled a thread and we stumbled on something, it seemed that we would get stonewalled. And so, NASA has stated that the term UAP does not necessarily imply extraterrestrial origin, which means we could be making these things domestic. And so, look, if these are advanced technologies, we're not interested in hurting national security, but we are interested in knowing what these UAPs are. You have the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office that was in the NDAA in 2022. 366 reports of UAPs. A number of them they will not classify. They cannot explain to us. Some they say is clutter, some they say are other anomalies, but then there are a bunch that they don't explain. And I think you see not just a bipartisan approach here in the House, but you see a bicameral approach with Senator Chuck Schumer and what he's trying to accomplish. And that really just is transparency and disclosure. I think the American people have a simple question, which is if none of this exists, if this is all false, why at every turn are there people trying to stop the transparency and the disclosure? Why are folks who are in charge of committees, whether they are in the House or in the Senate, opposed to this disclosure? And it's that point alone that piques the interest, right? And that's really what we're about. This is not about whether there are aliens or there are not aliens, right? Those are questions that I think remain unanswered, right? It's not whether there is stuff we have found here or not found here. Those questions remain unanswered. The problem is when we ask those questions, right, rather than being provided information that would prove it false, they stonewall the information. And that is what piques the interest. Thank you.
He's like, wait a minute.
And we are here today because all of the whistleblowers, the hearings, the investigations, the discussions, the work that we have done have culminated in a negotiation that is happening in real time right now over the National Defense Authorization Act. a piece of legislation I care deeply about as a member of the House Armed Services Committee. And in that negotiation, we are fortunate that the amendment Congressman Burchett offered to the House version of the NDAA provides a beachhead for us to be able to get the answers and to be able to demand the transparency that is necessary. It is insufficient, though, to seek this transparency from the Department of Defense alone. We have to have cooperation so that Title 50 authorities through the intelligence community are also subject to review. That the FAA, the NSA, the FBI, even state and local authorities that have information are able to have that cataloged, assessed, and then put out before the public. It is my belief that the Burchett Amendment is the strongest position when coupled with the additional authorities and additional agencies that I've just mentioned in order to be able to get to that productive result. Unfortunately, we have members of the House Intelligence Committee and the Senate Armed Services Committee who right now are frustrating the effort that we are putting forward in order to be able to obtain the information and to move forward. I think it is productive that Senator Schumer has engaged on this issue. He's not an insignificant person in this town, but I am concerned about embracing a disclosure paradigm that mirrors the JFK assassination disclosure paradigm. I don't know that there are any Americans who would view the JFK assassination disclosure paradigm as some sort of standard. Time and again, we've seen that system fail. I also don't believe that, pursuant to the Schumer language, we would have to wait 25 years in order to get this information. 25 years is a long time when you consider what Mr. Burchett said about the lack of veracity that the government has provided to the people up until this point. And so we're here to call for the most inclusive, most robust provisions possible to be included in the NDAA. We don't want to see a lot of log jams created. And in the event that there's any designation of a national security concern regarding disclosure, we believe that this information can no longer be siloed with the entities that have frustrated disclosure. That there should be broader briefings to members of Congress, that the Oversight Committee, which many of my colleagues here serve on, should be receiving those briefings, that the Armed Services Committee should be receiving those briefings, and it should not just be the fiefdom of the Intelligence Committee and the intelligence community. And if we achieve that objective, I think we can start to restore some of the trust the public has. But as we work through the finer points of that legislation, we felt it was important today to come forward and express where the log jams exist, where the opportunities lay before us, and we will pursue those with great vigor. I also wanted to specifically thank House Armed Services Chairman Mike Rogers. He allowed the Burchett Amendment to go on the bill without objection. I think he is to be commended for that. And also when my colleagues, Ms. Luna and Mr. Burchett and I were at an Air Force base and were told by Air Force officials that we weren't allowed to see information that whistleblowers had expressed to us existed, it was in fact Chairman Rogers himself who personally engaged with the Office of the Secretary of Defense and gave us the opportunity to view the images that were taken by pilots of some of these unidentified aerial phenomena. So work to be done, but we hope that this gives you clarity as to what our goals are, how the scope and depth of the mission ahead.
You know, I came to Congress thinking that this place was dysfunctional. And I had a general idea that the bureaucracy would try to block us. But seeing it from the inside, I can tell you it's worse than you can imagine. Everything that you suspect about the federal bureaucracy is doing, they're almost certainly doing. And it's nearly impossible to get a straight answer. So you all know my perspective, but at the end of the day, I think the taxpayers deserve to know where their money is being spent. The question we have before us is that, are we in an environment where the republic is being threatened by individuals and by people who are not elected to be able to withhold information from the public? And so I want to applaud the efforts of this group and the folks standing behind me, especially Mr. Burchett, who, as he said, it's time for Tim's amendment to be passed, and as well as the Schumer amendment. While they may not be perfect in their current forms, it gets us in a better direction. And it's my belief that both of them will actually put us in a better place. I don't think that they have to be mutually exclusive. At the end of the day, if we want transparency, we should be going after every avenue that we can to get the information to the American people. Thank you.
Well, again, thank you all. This is about accountability and about transparency. It's about holding the deep state to task for their refusal to declassify information that the American people need to know, that Congress needs to know. In July, I questioned highly decorated naval and intelligence officers who had been in aircraft, who had seen UAPs. What they told me was alarming. These officers told us that when encountering these UAPs, had they had to defend themselves or their aircraft or their personnel, they would not have been able to do so. Pre-military intelligence officials swore when giving those statements. Foreign objects are buzzing around in our airspace, and Joe Biden's over 30 generals have not only been silent on the issue, but have yet to play ball with Congress. Not to mention, American farmers are seeing intelligence aircraft above their fields. There have been 144 reported sightings of these objects that we know of, and the DoD is more concerned about pronouns and woke agendas than informing Congress and having accountability and having transparency. In a moment when American supply chains are broken, our border is overrun, and Chinese ownership in American institutions has skyrocketed. American defenses against unknown aircraft are paramount. Because of this bipartisan effort in the House and now the Senate, intelligence agencies are now beginning to tout exploratory measures to investigate UAPs. But this needs to be an expeditious process, not 25 years. That's unacceptable. It should be noted that the Kennedy deadline has been blown through a couple of times. Information released has been less than full disclosure. Kennedy deadline has been blown through a couple of times. Information released has been less than full disclosure. And so whether it's little green men, American technology, or worse, technology from the CCP, we need to know. There needs to be better cooperation amongst agencies, and Congress has a right, an obligation to know. This is about transparency. This is about accountability. The truth is out there, and the American people are ready. Yes, sir.
Is that it? Was that? Are they going to take questions now? Hey, the volume got really quiet. I can't hear the sound, Mark.
Yeah, that's on our end too. That's from the live stream.
I would like to be. That would be it.
All right, I'm going to share mine in.
64 pages.
Oh crap!
Matt,
Wrong window.
25 years. I mean, good gosh. Model something after the Kennedy assassination.
Can you hear that?
Waiting. Even it just.
Not a lot of people there.
Even it just proves that they allowed a delay 300 days.
I don't know. It got really quiet suddenly in the middle of the thing.
National security issue.
Yeah, like the audio is dropping out on all the streams. This is a different angle with a different stream that someone has.
Did you hear what Luna said?
Yeah. You want to repeat it?
It's a lie. My dad was chairman of the Armed Services Committee. Certain senators always read in. That's protocol.
That's interesting.
Yeah, she lied. American people are dumb, so she's just taking advantage of them. They'll fucking lie. They're all waffling, and this is good press for the subject, the ET UFO subject. It's good press. I like what they're talking about. But let me ask you guys a question. What do you think is going to happen in February when the election coverage starts in earnest?
Nationals.
The campaigning. This will be buried under a landslide of politics.
To me,
in the media.
It disappears, right? Like it's gone.
Yep. So who cares what they say now? No one will remember it. The politics is the number one spectator confrontational sport in the world, especially in America. All the news channels will cover politics 24/7. Now I could always be wrong. I always say that, but it's like, even if these guys are being altruistic, this kind of rhetoric, oh, we don't want to ruin any national security protocols. We don't, we want to be team players, but we want the truth out.
We don't know.
They're
And
just,
of course,
they're just talking about it.
I think you got a tab open, John. I tried isolating that sound. It's still coming through. I think it's on. You got a tab open.
Sure that's not
Me?
our enemies, but that does not justify.
Oh wait, no, it's me. Sorry, I have two tabs open because I keep hearing this audio.
Yes, you heard from
I mean, it's good stuff, but it's just more run around in hot air.
I'm still hearing it.
Gifts
Oh.
into the types
Okay.
of things that we want to receive as elected lawmakers. It really raises questions about whether or not this is really the propriety of some of our intelligence assets, or whether it's part of a cover-up. And only
Right.
when we get the information,
Cover-up.
we'll be able to parse that.
That's
decision.
good. They're saying words that are key, but this has been going on for 200 years. They more conferences and more, hearings and more, and then all of a sudden, a bigger issue comes up, like the 2024 election, and it all goes to shit.
I believe that the recalcitrance from the CIA and from the intelligence community may be animated by some of the cover-up that we have seen up to this point. I hope that's not true, but I'm concerned that it is. And so that's why the Burchett language currently in the NDAA gives us a beachhead to be able to access not only Department of Defense authorities and Department of Defense activities and programs, but we have to actually get into what the CIA has done with UAPs.
But you got to ask yourself, since 1947, they've told us this.
Okay, Mike.
Since 1947, basically, they've told us these don't exist. Yet now we're finding out they're spending millions of dollars. NASA has reports on it. The CIA now has reports on it, but yet the Pentagon keeps telling us they don't exist. So again, we're spending a heck of a lot of money to tell people something, to investigate something that doesn't exist.
Yeah, but you're asking the right question, if I can
Yeah.
jump in for a second, because here's again what this doesn't make logical sense, right? Is if this is all nonsense, right? Then why are we seeing constant from different areas of government whistleblowers coming out with things that are credible? Why, as legislators, are we being stonewalled? Why does it feel like just as we're making some progress, all of a sudden the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future come out to talk to staff or legislators that then all of a sudden aren't on board with more disclosure? And I think that's the American people who are following this. That is the same question that you're asking that they're asking. We see the Pentagon not being able to pass an audit for 6 years straight. Grush testified under oath that, part of these programs, these advanced technology programs, are being funded by overfunding programs in some areas of the budget or backdooring money. And so, again, we have been asking these questions, from the financial standpoint and from the transparency standpoint. And it's, Ryan, same question that you had. The intelligence community does not want to share any of this information with Congress. We're asking why? Why? And that it makes it appear that there is a substantial reason why they don't, not an insubstantial reason, right? It's not just maybe it's one of our new toys, right? And so that's, I think, why you see this group pressing so hard.
If you go back to the hearing and think about what was said in committee, is that, you're seeing this increased activity, yes, near military installation, conflicts, areas of operation, but you're also seeing it near our nuclear installations. And if you assume for a moment that it's American technology, we have normal areas of operation that we would test new aircraft, right? But it's now conflicting with commercial aircraft. So again, there's got to be an accountability mechanism that if it is our technology, that it's being operated safely, that it's being tested safely. And if it's Chinese technology, then we need to know and ask those questions of, are we ready? What are we doing to counter that? So I don't know if it's Little Green Men or U.S. Technology or the CCP, but they're engaging in around our nuclear facilities. And I don't care who it is or where it's from, that should concern you. There are questions that need to be asked. There are questions that need to be answered. And I'll be damned, we're going to find those answers and we're going to turn over every stone until we get them. Well, yeah, I am hesitant to make that leap, but what I can tell you is that when Congresswoman Luna and Congressman Burchett and I were at Eglin Air Force Base, and there were hours of frustrations where they didn't want to let us see a photograph taken by a pilot during a test flight. When I saw the photograph, ultimately, thanks to Chairman Rogers weighing in with the Office of the Secretary of Defense, I can tell you it is of nothing that I'm aware of having existing in our arsenal of assets. And I'm on the Armed Services Committee for 7 years. I'm not unfamiliar with the things that we have at our disposal, and it was not something that I could classify as something that we would possess or a capability that any of our adversaries possess, because we also keep pretty close eye on those capabilities as well. So that leaves the question rather open on that.
In the testimony, there was 13 or 14 documented near misses.
And I lost the audio. No, I can't hear the audio, man. Hey, Mark.
There, it's very quiet. It's very quiet.
Well,
Oh.
Yeah,
Oh, you can't. You can only hear their microphone. You can't hear the questions in the audience.
A lot of unanswered questions from the Chinese spy balloon incident. I can tell you that our concern about China, particularly in the Gulf of Mexico, emerges from their increased activities in Cuba. And if they are building out more capabilities, and frankly, you see a leveraged buyout of old Russian assets in Cuba being turned over to Chinese control. And so that's what animates our interest in that. Yes,
First answer is no. The second is I just like to see more transparency. That's all I want. You all in the media, that's what we got to have. And it's very difficult for me to go home and talk to people who don't trust the government when the government is telling them something doesn't exist, but is spending millions, if not billions of dollars on researching what doesn't exist.
If I can jump in too real quick, to be clear, I think that Schumer's efforts here are probably the floor as to where we would like to see disclosure begin. So not to say that they're not good efforts. I think basically any step forward is a step forward in the right direction here. But again, going back to just what we have faced, it shouldn't be the case that it is this complicated to release this information. And also just to, put it out there, I mean, it should scare the American people that there is maybe, whether it's special interest or corporation, that thinks that they have a say in what your taxpayer dollars go to, and also what information, the American people are not stupid. We can handle this information. Other countries have declassified similar information, and it's time that the United States steps up to the plate and does the same.
One aspect of the Schumer amendment that draws a little concern for me is an appointed body that would review information or photographs or what have you before it's released to the public. That is an appointed body that the American public would have no control over. It'd be appointed by a politician. You'd know who'd be on there. You'd have the missile defense companies. You'd have the usual cast of characters. And to me, that casts a chilling effect on the whole thing, in my opinion.
I want to add something to Tim said, because I want to give him some credit. So back to your question of have we seen progress? I mean, listen, it's not like the 118th Congress is doing a lot of things, right? So in fairness, right, I think we're at the same pace. I think because of Tim's efforts and the group behind us, we are actually seeing a lot of progress. First of all, we had a hearing in the House that had never happened before. The Intelligence Committee had a hearing that hadn't happened in 50 years. Okay, we've now had multiple press conferences on this. You're having legislation introduced, not just in the House, but in the Senate. So this has come a long way from the times when Harry Reid was talking about it or Marco Rubio was talking about it. You now have a bipartisan, bicameral effort. And so, this place does a lot of things, unfortunately, incrementally, right? It doesn't do big things at the moment. So I got to, Tim is the one who has spearheaded a lot of this. And so, to give him a little more credit that he's willing to give himself, I think we're making a lot of progress. We just have to accept the fact that the pace here in Washington, that we're caught up in that same pace.
Yes, sir.
Have you been able to see any documents or videos EPC that were considered classified?
Yeah, no, I mean, we have.
And so when you see them, have you said to yourself, there's no way this is the threat to national security? Why is this still being concealed?
I have reviewed classified information and thereafter, wondered to my declassified. And so I have had those concerns. I've also, as a member of this committee, seen some radar signatures and other information that even my colleagues who are not on the armed services to see, and that concerns me as well. I think we ought to democratize that information at a minimum throughout the Congress, and I think more productively with the American people. We'll take one more.
I was going to say, I've seen stuff by whistleblowers that you would all be scratching your head. Go ahead, last question.
When the reaction I've gotten is just sort of a broad brush national security concern. There's not been really an itemized critique of the Burchett amendment to the NDAA. It's been more just a generalized veto from the Senate Armed Services Committee and the House Intelligence Committee, and that's most unfortunate. Great, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
That was an excellent theater display of performance art.
Look at the audience. There wasn't any.
Well, everyone's online. There, we have 378 people, more than could fit in that room, sitting right in our live audience right now. So, yeah.
I mean, where does anyone begin? I mean, I think it's good.
Imagine if we didn't have the internet.
I think it's good they're talking about it. More press on the issue, the better. Okay, but Luna was wrong. Certain members of armed services are read in always. That's practical. I mean, you want your most conservative and smartest senators and congressmen read in on the UFO ET topic.
I know Jack Reed knows stuff.
I would take out the word conservative. They're the people who are bought out.
Yeah, well, some are. Some, they're all bought out in a sense, but like I said, my dad was beholden to the Navy and Marines. The Navy's always had the lion's share of UFO technology because most crashes are out to sea, and they're dealing with high technology in their ships and aircraft since the beginning, since the Civil War with the Monitor. So they're tasked with most of it, and so this press conference was a good thing, but it's also more of the same things they've been saying for 150 years. this group is stonewalling. Well, we got to get an initiative going. Let's create a task force. They got all the hot button political speak, phrases going, and they're like, well, we don't want to ruin national security, so we'll just, do it without it. And it's like, well, then you're not going to get anywhere, because everything sensitive is under national security protocols. So they're just running around talking about it, which, like I said, is good, but it's like, this is lip service, folks.
Yeah, again, the DOE probably has way more technology too than the DOD. So she's basically telling us to look in the wrong place too. Like, oh, we have to look in,
Exactly. This is a distraction, in my view. Like I said,
they're distracted too, though. Yeah, you got to understand.
These folks are controlled opposition.
Isn't it an effort? And this is just how I'm seeing it. It seems like an effort to validate the Eric Davis memo by some of these disclosure folks, right? Now, we know that Gary Nolan read that to the Gallagher guy who brought that into Congress for that first UAP hearing, right? And then it just seems like what they're bringing up in these hearings is that they were stonewalled. They keep on reiterating that, like, there's information we're not allowed to have, which seems like a precursor for something else that the disclosure process is trying to plant the seed for this year, right? And they keep on, 2027 and all these different like timelines. It just seems like another rung in the ladder.
Yeah,
to get there. No answers, but presenting certain questions.
Yeah, they always set they set up a projected goal line, and then they get there and they're like, well, we're going to reorganize and do another task force, and then we'll do it in 2026. And they're pushing, they're buying time. They're buying time. This whole government operation, all of them, they're buying time.
You also have to figure out with the disclosure thing that the Eric Davis memo is one thing, but there's even more hard evidence with of what happened at Battelle in the 1950s. Guys like Elroy John Center and Sarbacher and others that have said that they saw this technology firsthand while working at Battelle, and then it came out that Ronald Moultrie, the Pentagon spokesperson at the first UFO hearing, he took all his Battelle connections down off his LinkedIn before that hearing. So he hid his connections to Battelle before they put him on that hearing. So these guys are all deep state. They all know way more than they're letting on, and it's all super.
Well, I don't know about this group. They're low-level folks. Trust me, but these
people, again, these are our congressmen and senators, and I think that they're misled.
They might know something, but again,
they're not deep.
They want to control the narrative, and the only way to do that is to control the opposition groups.
I think people are controlling the narrative.
We're all freaks and loons. They don't care about us. They want their own. Gosh, we want disclosure. We don't want to ruin national security, but we want disclosure. And it's like, well, you're not going to get anything then. But most people listening, the John Q. public and Jane, they don't know that. They don't know the things we know. And it's like, they know who the audience is. It's not the disclosure movement. Their audience is the general public.
What about that specific amendment? Tim Burchett put an amendment forward that would allow pilots to talk to Congress directly about their encounters, and the FAA is blocking it.
Yeah, talk, not reveal. Talk.
Why?
You have to listen carefully to the rhetoric. You can talk to Congress all you want. They're not going to reveal anything you said. See what I mean? This is political.
Why would the FAA be blocking it?
Well, the FAA is in cahoots with the military-industrial complex because UFOs showed up on radar, starting the 1940s. But before that, they don't want you to know the old history. All these people are talking about at the oldest is 2004 Nimitz footage. Right. They want you to think it's a modern issue. It's not. They're not going to talk about any of the Foo Fighters or the 1950s or John G. Trump was involved with high voltage. T. Townsend Brown experiments with anti-gravitics. They don't want you to know that. They want you to think this is modern, new, fresh. They're
Right.
spinning it.
I want you to realize that the father of modern theoretical physics and string theory, Ed Witten, his father was hired by Glenn L. Martin Company to run the anti-gravity research program in the 50s. They don't
They're
want
never
you
gonna talk about that. No, they want you to think this is brand new. And did you hear them? They're like little green men again.
Yeah. Yeah. What's up with that?
Motherfuckers.
It's just a ridicule. It's like
Those
the push
people
the
you just
button.
saw don't give a damn about the American people. Very few politicians do. My dad did, but his hands were tied on, whatever excuse that is, but he did. Most of these people only care about their own ass and how much money they can make as a consultant after they're out of office. Whoever's in charge of Burchett, running Burchett, hell, it could be Chris Mellon for all I know. They're controlled opposition. They're talking about the subject, releasing some steam pressure, but then
but why have anybody talk about it at all? Yeah,
we're going to bury this topic, but good. And what about all the military pilots and airline pilots who have seen UFOs? Millions.
I like Burchett. I think he's one of the good guys. I just don't think he has access to all the right information, and he's just going with what he has. And I think there's so many people feeding him so much bad information on all sides. He just he doesn't know what to do.
It's a possibility, but to me, he just seems like very convenient all of a sudden. He came out of nowhere talking about this shit. You got to be suspicious about people coming out of nowhere. He doesn't have a long track record. Somebody said, "Here, Tim, go talk about this." And yes, he may have good intentions. I'm very suspicious of politicians, as you can tell.
Yeah,
good reason.
Because this is a kind of a hot button. It's a kind of a hot button topic now. Could it just be that he sees it as a kind of a platform, to help him,
a wedge issue,
Yeah, spotlight, the limelight.
Right.
And it all goes away with the 2024 election. And Tim Burchett is, his star is risen in the pecking order. And he can talk about, well, there was a sighting by, United Airlines, and gosh, gee whiz, it's an anomaly mystery we got to figure out, and, sort of keep the softball stuff going. That's what they're doing today. It's just softball stuff. Gosh, gee whiz, we want the truth, but we're not going to go up against national security and the IC, the intelligence folks. Why are they stonewalling us? But we don't want to, antagonate them. I mean, it's the worst politics. It's just hot air. Everyone's excited. They're talking about it. I'm glad, and everyone's like, oh, this is great. And it's like, well, it's good, but they're not saying anything pertinent, and they're not giving you the whole picture at all. Neither is Chris Mellon and everyone else. They're giving you a very thin slice of the overall issue and the history of it.
Yeah, it seems like they're milking it. Like you said, they got long-term plans, right? So this is just part of the thing. Repetition is really key with the media, to allow it to kind of seep into a certain level. In your guys' opinion, how wide is the canyon between what people think is going on versus what is actually going on?
Grand Canyon.
I would say it depends on what the subject is, but what I've seen them do in this arena is, if people are getting close to the truth, they just throw out a whole bunch of lies, and then you don't know what to believe.
Yep.
Just muddy the waters.
Yeah, they just add, I always say that in my interviews, they're just adding more mud to the waters because they never control the whole narrative. So, they're throwing up smoke grenades and muddying the waters and doing all this stuff. They're talking about it, but they're not really talking to the meat of it. They're talking about, they always nibble around the edges of the butter cookie, the little brown crispy parts. They never take a bite.
My BS meter in this field, going on the anti-gravity part, the real disclosure, the technology side, was I was looking for papers and scientific experiments that made sense, A, made sense, and B, didn't have a lot of stuff going on online, didn't have a large following. None of the Bob Lazar, Element 115, stuff that are mainstream media, all that crap screams, fakery. But when I first found this Alzafon experiment with dynamic nuclear orientation, Jeremy Reese, who's been doing this for 10 years, has never even heard of it. And that's when I really honed in on, like, there's something here. Because if it hasn't made it onto the mainstream yet, and it's something so fundamental like nuclear spin, there's got to be something to it. And so far, we've seen up to 18% weight loss, and we're up in our game. We're hoping to get up to 80%. At which point it will be commercially viable for a craft.
Congress or government officials will never talk about anti-gravitics or anti-gravity or mass reduction or weight reduction.
I got them to once at an AlienCon conference, but they told me ultra classified.
They'll never, because that's all national security stuff. They want to talk about the subject, but it's under a huge iron-clad, armor plate. How are you going to?
The reason for that armor plate is the technology. It's not about the aliens. They could give a rat's ass about the aliens. It's all about the technology.
Yeah.
And this is a nuclear technology. We're not splitting atoms here. We're not blowing shit up. We're cooling shit down. We're calming shit down.
Right.
It's the opposite
It's
side
like
of the nuclear
cold fusion and the like.
No, it's not fusion at all. It's cooling down the atom. It's orienting it. It's Bose-Einstein condensates.
No, I understand, but the general public isn't.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, I understand what you're talking about. The general public is never going to cotton much to quantum theory, string theory, quantum computers, a hard drive that exists in hyperspace, a quantum computer that exists. That it's gobbledygook to most people. They want to hear about UFOs and aliens abducting cows and people, and is Star Trek true? And are the Klingons and the Romulans are they invading? I'm sorry, that's. I don't mean to be mean to anyone, but I talk to learned people, and they're like, what? What are you talking about? You're an idiot. And there's a huge cognitive dissonance around the world. These officials and politicians and disclosure spooks and people, they know that. They know who their audience is, and it's not us.
I actually had some guy just walk off the street the other day. He saw the sign, Falcon Space, Advancing Anti-Gravity Technology, knocks on the door. He's like, can I come in? He's a contractor, lives here in Hawthorne. And he walks in. He's like, yeah, I had some great idea about anti-gravity with sound. He's explaining it to me. And I'm like, 1 second. I go over to the next table. I pick it up. I'm like, this is the device you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
People like
Hawthorne, Nevada?
No, so actually, SpaceX is in Hawthorne, California. We're in Hawthorne, New Jersey. We're the SpaceX of the East, Falcon Space.
There's a secret Navy submarine base in Hawthorne, and the story is it's access to aquifers and tunnels that go all over the United States for small submarines.
Secrets out.
Secrets out. Yeah. Guys, I just want to say real quick, those of you who are watching, if you enjoyed this podcast, it helps really immensely if you will hit that subscribe button. If you want to show your support, you can consider joining with the channel membership. Thank you so much for everyone watching. We rely on your support and you liking these videos, subscribing to the channel, and sharing them for us to reach wider and larger audiences and break through the shadow bans and censorship that goes on with the more technical knowledge and stuff on this topic. So thank you for that, Tupacabra, and everyone else who out there who with the kind words and support of the channel, and please, just do your part, and we're totally putting a dent in their disinfo or psyop operation and narrative by injecting science and experimentation into the whole mix, because you can't have fake stories and people believing in anything that's not real or disinformation when you have science there to sort of cut through the nonsense. So no, absolutely not. In fact, it's part of my, if you don't have an FBI file, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. And if you're scared, you shouldn't be, because they really can't get us all. And they don't have as much power or control as people think they do or ascribe to them. And seriously, they
were here a month ago looking for enriched uranium.
they could come after me. They could do whatever they want. And if they kill me or whatever, it's just going to make us stronger and grow bigger. So I'm not scared. I do this for all of humanity, because humanity depends on us bringing disclosure and bringing this technology out to save it. In my opinion, it's better to die a martyr fighting so that this world doesn't become 1984. So that my children can grow up and have the opportunity to become Captain Picard, captain of the Starship Enterprise, and not have the only opportunities afforded to them being in poverty and working 9 to 5 every day of the week, sometimes 2 jobs, 90 hours a week. Some people work just to pay the man. So yes, sustainability in the future is really important. So I think that if we all come together, man, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. And if these people want to get rid of us, and then the intelligence community wants to get rid of us, then they're basically shooting themselves in the foot, because we're the only guys that are working to actually figure this stuff out and bring some clarity to this. Besides, whoever's in their black programs that can't talk, I'm sure they have plenty of other people and plenty of other laboratories working on all kinds of stuff. But again, it's not doing any good if those $20 trillion in unaccountable funds is just never seeing the light of day. So I believe there's people inside these organizations that support us, as well as people that hate us and want to censor us. So it's a mixed group. It's a mixed group of individuals, and we're just doing what we can, guys. And
well, at the very least, we can go to our deaths. I mean, I'm older than you guys. I mean, we can go to our deaths saying, well, at least I gave a shit and I tried to do something. However,
right. If we got to wait 25 years, you're not going to be around. I'm going to be 68 when that. I'm going to be like, what is it? Yeah, I'm going to be like in my 60s.
I won't be around. But it doesn't matter. Getting the ball rolling at a good pace, that's plenty for me and others. Greer's 68, I think. I'm 61. There are other prominent researchers that are older, and it's like everyone's done their part, however big or small. And that's all you can do, because there's a metaphysical part of all this, and the mystics in that world, they'll tell you that souls come to Earth to evolve and learn the hard way, hard knocks, school of hard knocks. And it's like a lot of people won't wake up in my lifetime or even yours. That's okay. It's all about we don't need 7.7 billion people to wake up. We need like 250 million. That would be great in 30 years. That'd be great. It's sad because wars and genocide and inequality and human trafficking and all that nasty shit just keeps rolling on. But you got to always remember, it's like my wife tells us, our souls are infinite. And this is just a learning experience. You can do whatever you want in the next life, I hope. You want to go to the other side of the universe and, plant mangoes and trees and, knock yourself out, or you can come back to Earth and I don't know, do whatever. It's that kind of I like that kind of metaphysical, spiritual angle of all this. It's like we can talk about the science and the military and the politics, but really, we're going through a massive spiritual journey. I went through the dark night of the soul before I really woke up, and it was nasty. I mean, I'm a racing driver in the old days, and I've been close to death 100 times, but this was just horrendous. And I was just a different person. I don't know what to tell you. I knew about some of this all my life, and I was interested in it. But all of a sudden, it was like the lights in the room came on. And I can
talking about 5-MeO DMT?
I don't know. I wasn't doing drugs or anything, but I mean, I'm not going to get into it, but there is something in metaphysics called the dark night of the soul. And for stubborn old goats like me, sometimes it's the kick in the ass you need. Other people may not need it. But I've talked to a lot of people and they've been through it one way or another, whatever it is. And it helps. because I have depression. So, but that's a gift. I'm a writer, and it's a gift of creativity, but it's also a gift of insight, because you look for answers within. You're like, the world is just fucking crazy, and you start to turn inwards on yourself, and it's like, and you begin to trust your sixth sense, your higher self, those kinds of concepts. And synchronicity, Carl Jung's theory, man, my wife and I go through so much synchronicity now. We just ignore it.
Have you noticed an increase? Because I hear about it all the time, right?
Huge.
Even in conversations on live streams or spaces on Twitter, it just continues to happen. If I'm multitasking at all, right, I'll type a random word.
And numerology.
Yeah, you hear what you're saying. You say what you're hearing. It's very, very interesting these days.
Yeah, like Ferdinand Porsche is a character in all my books, and he's a great character to write about. I used to race for Porsche, and I'll look at the clock on my computer. What the fuck time is it? And it'll say 9:11, 9:28. 9:44, and I'm like, really?
Speaking of synchronicities, interesting thing just happened a little bit ago. I don't know if you know Brian Ahern, but he was at a wedding for the friend of a friend of mine from college, and Brian was talking to him. He's like, "Oh, Michael, do you mean Michael Perot?" No, Michael Delia, but we both had the same first name, so he thought he was me. And then that got Brian Ahern intrigued. And now he's tutoring me, I guess. So weird how the world works.
I think it's happening to everybody, but people involved in this kind of subject with all the tangent occult and metaphysics and theosophy and philosophy, we're all kind of tapping into those things. We notice it.
Yeah.
Whereas others are just like, it was a coincidence. Really fun. I ran into my doppelganger at the supermarket. My wife just told me a story last night. She's like, I met somebody that was the exact duplicate of me. And we waved at each other, and then, it's unbelievable.
You have to, these coincidences happen, but you have to build the world around you such that those coincidences end up being helpful to you. Because something like that, Brian could have met the other kid, but if we weren't friends or we didn't know each other, or Brian Ahern hadn't heard of me, they would have connected, but they wouldn't have made that connection. They wouldn't have realized. So these coincidences always happen, but you have to cast that net out there. You have to build something.
Yeah, you have to take the first step. Like this equipment from Los Alamos, I was actually looking for those pieces of equipment for a while, and we flew out to New Mexico. We were at Albuquerque for a Tesla Tech conference, and one of the presenters is up there talking about the Salzafon experiment, and I was just like, oh shit, I need that piece of equipment again. I search on my phone. They suddenly dumped 10 of them on eBay, all from this one seller in Albuquerque. It was a 20-minute drive from the hotel.
Yeah. Oh, that's wild. Now, Pasoka talked about synchronicity as being almost like experiencing a higher dimensional something. Something's connected, right? But it's not causally connected. It's a very fascinating aspect of how I often think that synchronicities are happening all the time, but we're not paying attention to life that much to connect, to make those connections. But suddenly seeing it, it almost feels like a eureka moment sometimes, where it's just such a unique experience, like deja vu or something. It feels so significant, and then it kind of, when you do notice, it kind of leads you in a certain direction. It's a fascinating thing.
Yeah, it really is fascinating, and I think it's just part of the awakening process where you notice little things. What is that? Rick and Morty? What do you have?
That's the Rick and Morty spaceship. I have a little Hot Wheels collection on the Faraday cage.
Yeah, my grandson watches that. There's definitely some, intel leaking out through that crazy. It's like my generation of Star Trek Lost in Space, and they'll say, "Oh, it's the beast from the higher dimension," and you're like, "That's interesting." What?
Here's another cute one. This is the Jetsons. We all thought
you're cut off from the toys.
Oh, and of course, classic.
Oh,
please.
That's cool. I didn't know they did that. Okay, well,
some of them $2 a piece, so I don't think it's.
Yeah, they're like $5 a piece or something like that.
That's all right.
I'd like the Enterprise for Christmas, please.
Yes. Do you have the sport model from Bob Lazar?
They didn't make that one yet.
Come on.
Oh, you know, Revell, you know, the toy company, the model kit
Tesker's
company,
model. Yeah,
they
the model.
did a TR3 and somebody made them pull it off. And now they're trading on what, eBay for like $500 now.
We made a TR3B cake.
Yeah, no,
Yep.
they really, it's weird. That's a dumb move. Remember, a lot of these people are really smart in their very narrow groove. You know, these Intel people and others, and then they're like, oh, the birthday cake, we're cracking down. They send the men in black over, they take the cake away from the kid. No TR3B for you. You know, it's like stupid.
Yeah.
Now the whole neighborhood knows. So I mean, they do a lot of stupid things if you watch and you know, that's crazy to stamp down on people and throw them off YouTube. That's just going to give them more credibility, in my view. Yes,
Yeah.
less eyeballs, but more credibility. You know,
The
people-
shadow bans kind of like backfire some ways too, because people see that I go on my friends, you know, when you have, it's not apparent anymore. It's like right out there and obvious in your face when, you know, you take screenshots of it and people are sharing it. Like, I don't know if you've seen this. This is, I want to share this real quick. This is from Alien Girl. She posted this on Twitter. She did a whole thing on the Pentagon missing money and UFO secrets, talking about those missing trillions and stuff. And that's what they don't want you to talk about.
11 views, yes.
11 views, 60 likes. So obviously she's getting more than 11 views if she got 60 likes on the video.
Oh, I've been told by my spook friends, don't pay attention to numbers on YouTube or
Yeah, they're
Twitter.
nerfing the view counts, man. For
That's
all we know,
all
we got
controlled. That's all mucked with.
Oh yeah, we saw that over the last like 3-4 years. We saw some of the most intense, obvious, blatant, you know what I mean, editing, censoring, all that stuff in there. So for them to fudge with the numbers with
And
you know,
Elon Musk is their back pocket boy.
Mm-hmm.
You
Look
don't
at
get
look at her title.
billionaire, the richest man in the world, without the help from the deep state. They created
Yeah.
him. A lot of people believe that. He's Afrikaner German. So I'm throwing that out there. You know, he's not an American. And remember, these Nazi
Wasn't his grandfather born in America? Wasn't he from like Oklahoma or something?
I'm not an expert on his lineage, but I know that for a fact.
Russian.
And a lot of, you know, remember a lot of the paperclip Germans in the old days, they would bring over more and more Germans and say, I will not work with these Americans. They're too slow. The contractors are too slow. We want to do it all in-house. Well, they nixed that because the Nazis would have had too much power at NASA, but they like to work with Germans. So I'm, you know, no offense, Germany, but it's like, you know, there's a lot of strange things going on with this, but I've been thrown off Twitter twice. No reason. It's just gone. No message, no nothing. But I have a friend who's, you know, into that, you know, into the Intel world, and he's an IC guy and, you know, IT, and he got me back on. But if I go away again, you know, I'm not going back on. I'm not going to even try. You know, it's just, I had a friend who was thrown off this morning. She emailed me. She's just like, no message, no nothing. It's just gone.
Thank you again for taking the time out of your day to come in and join us, man. You've
Well,
made
no, it's
some
interesting. You guys are great. I mean,
awesome
smart
discussion.
people, we're all out of the box, you know, differing opinions, but that's good. To have different.
Yeah, no, it's a great opinion. It's a great thoughts. You know, I don't agree with everything. You know, I still think that's, you know, as far as who's controlled and to what extent and how, it's all a game. It's not like you can see like they're all obviously
head
like
games. There's so many head games. So,
Right.
I mean, I give my opinion, but you know,
We started this call not even knowing that there was going to be this live stream with Luna going on. We found that out.
There's synchronicity right there. God damn it.
Yeah.
God damn it.
Yeah, this was great.
That just happened. I found
you know,
we got to cover that live on stream. That was great because that was a huge way to break it up too, and just solidify a lot of the discussion points too with you know, showing that.
Oh, I thought you had that recorded somewhere.
It's out there so people can find it. I'll post some links in the description below so people can find it.
That it came up live. I mean, that's just,
Yeah, no, this is great. I don't want to keep it going. YouTube doesn't like you to go much further over 2 hours for the algorithm. So I want to wrap it up here. I think we hit a lot of great points and a lot of great discussion topics here today. And I hope everyone watching learned something, and they can share that information and help kick this can a little further along.
Hell yeah. Jeremy, thank you so much for having the show. Mark, I'm going to definitely check out Falcon Space. And John, great to finally talk to you, man.
Yeah, man. It really is good. All you guys are, on point. It's very helpful even for us. It's like helpful cognitive behavioral therapy in a sense, because you're talking to like-minded folks who are knowledgeable. And it's very important. We're not doing this to aggrandize ourselves. Everyone's like, oh, you UFO enthusiasts, you're all in there for the fame and the money. It's like,
yeah,
you want to be famous and make money? This is not the topic.
Not at all. No.
Nobody's making money, any kind of big money. It's crazy.
I mean, over here, if we actually make a breakthrough, there's a lot of money to be made in the hardware.
Yeah.
It's Joe Rogan, if you're watching, man, I only want to get on your podcast to get the information out. I'm not after the fame. I don't want the fame, really. I'd rather not be well known about, I like being able to have my anonymity and walk down the street and not have people recognize me. I've already had that happen a few times on the train or something, in the city. It's scary when people are like, oh, you're alien scientists. And it's like, oh boy. But I couldn't imagine, being a Joe Rogan or being on Joe Rogan. So I
don't think you want to be.
I don't think so. No.
The woman I talked to was thrown off Twitter. She was asked to go on and she refused because Joe does a good show, but man, he's got all of them, the Mellon and their company. And then he goes on with Grush and Lazar, and then they cut him off.
Corbell.
He's had Corbell on 7 times, man.
Oh, that's his boy.
There you go, folks.
There you go, right there. Have fun with
both
triangles, but
it's funny. Corbell's been his access point to a lot of his other UFO or UAP related guests, and a lot of them he voices sentiment that they kind of seemed a little suspicious. So it's like maybe talk to a different crowd.
Have better sources. Both sides, so he always comes out a winner.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm sorry. I've seen these guys come and go. Jack Parr, and when I was a kid, and then others doing talk shows, and they inflame, and then they cool it down, and they're always in the middle, safe.
That's it. I'd have to record it if I did, just so I'd have it, because it would just get deleted. I know that if I did it, I wouldn't. It would just get deleted if I did an episode with.
No, if any of us went on, let's say all of us went on, they would edit that up.
Yeah.
To make us all look like fools.
Yeah. No, I guarantee it. Yeah.
Maybe we're crazy, but we're not fools. It's like, they would do that. So you can't control that. And so when he makes people out to be heroes, he's a team player. He's on board, sorry. I don't
question everything, man. And
it's where are you going to find an impartial interviewer other than you, Jeremy, somebody that a like-minded person, but somebody famous and big and well paid like Tucker Carlson. I mean, you're never going to get, he plays both sides against the middle, and he always comes out clean as a whistle. I'm sorry, these people aren't about getting the truth out. They're out to polish their stars so they shine brighter.
Sense, yeah.
At your expense. So I'm never going to go on anything. I don't think they'd ever ask. I'm too close to Chris Mellon. I would be his crazy black sheep cousin, and ha ha ha.
Yeah, exactly. They tried that here in the comments when we first started, but they got over it. So, thank you again for.
Mark should talk about the technology. That's a relatively safe portion of this topic.
Yeah, and I found a way actually to explain it to a fifth grader and have them actually understand it.
That's Joe.
And I think I could explain some very fundamental things about physics that most physicists have no clue where mass comes from. Where does inertial mass come from? Physicists have no idea. I came up with this pretty simple theory. It's got to do with nuclear spins, the wobbles of subatomic particles changing, and that's what inertial mass is.
I wanted to ask you, Mark, and I'll ask this to everyone. There's a theory out there that because photons are a major part of the atom, that given the holographic universe theory, everything is consciousness, light.
Yes.
That
Michael
everything
Talbot.
matter is made of light, but it's held together by certain gravitational forces that we're not taught about.
Well, matter is made out of light. Energy is light. It's all energy. So where does the mass come from? And my answer to that is that it's actually just the wobbles in how the energy is spinning around. So like subatomic particles are literally energy that's spun in on itself, like light photons that are spinning around themselves very quickly, but they're also wobbling in many different ways. And when you move them,
These called perturbations.
Consciousness
create
consciousness is like a hologram. It's a and also it's a hologram. It's a spherical hologram that your brain actually only interacts with half of your consciousness because it's half a sphere. Your consciousness is found in your pineal gland in the center of the brain, and you're interacting with your brain in order to move your fingers. Actually, moving your fingers, moving your mouth, the fact that your body works, this is all quantized effects coming into the macro world. Like it's a subatomic, a subquantum field, which is your soul, that is controlling your brain, and through that nerves controlling your body. Your whole soul is actually a sphere. That's why these higher energy beings we see, they're all spheres.
Like orbs.
I've heard that. And you know what the story, one guy told me, the military acronym for your aura is? BLEAF. Bioluminescent Electromagnetic Intelligence Field.
Oh, snap.
Yes, that makes sense.
Now, why does the military have an acronym for you?
Yeah.
I guess they call it, well, that's the M1PH5. They'll have some bullshit acronym for their soul.
No, for sure. Reminds me of the scene from that movie Broken Arrow, where he's like, I don't know what's scarier, that it happened or that it happened so much you guys have a name for it.
Yeah.
So if they're covering it.
Bingo.
So Mark, are you talking about like basically the consciousness is a non-physical, like non-dimensional, like the 2D maybe thing, and that the body and the act of thinking consciously through your body and moving your fingers is in some way like a translation between a non-physical data structure or whatever, and then this physical world is just kind of translating it so we can interact with the world around us. Like you said, moving your fingers, you know what I mean? It's translating information.
Autonomic.
Your soul is a subatomic or quantum holographic spherical interference pattern. That's a big jumble of words. Let me break it down. Interference pattern is what makes a hologram. If you take a picture of a rose, a holographic picture of a rose, and you were to cut it in half, you'd end up with two pictures of a rose. Not two.
And this is because holography involves laser light, right? It's a reflection of laser light.
That's how we can make it, but holography is a lot more than that. It's really just an interference pattern. So when they did, this is all coming out of that book, Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot that you just mentioned, John.
Like they say, the sun is an electromagnetic sphere, not a fusion reactor. When astronomers look at stars, sometimes they go back and the stars are just gone. And so they say, oh, they burned out in but there's no trace. And, the metaphysical people will tell you everything has a soul from the atom to the star, as I wrote in my book, that the sun has a soul and every planet has a soul. And the sun just evolved into a higher dimension and said, bye-bye.
One interesting thing about the sun,
it is.
You should all know, if anyone's up north, the sun put out 4 earthbound coronal mass ejections this week. The first 3 were kind of weaker, slower moving. The 4th one is a very quick one. They're all going to hit tonight between 9 p.m. Eastern until the morning. There's going to be a massive solar storm going on tonight. They say
you'll see the aurora.
Yes. You might see the aurora up in Michigan. There, I was thinking of actually going out some dark place here in New Jersey, see if that could happen.
I'll see. I'm gonna get my camera out and I'll be out tonight watching for sure. That's awesome. Thanks for letting us know. This is great. So let's again, we need more oversight in our government. We need to know where they've spent that $20 trillion that went missing of your taxpayer dollars.
Good luck.
And mine and yours, man. I want to know what they spent our money on. And
I can tell you in 5 seconds of some of it.
Yeah, let's go.
Deep underground military bases.
Yep.
Don't believe it? Mount Weather in Virginia, Raven Rock in Pennsylvania, Dugway Proving Ground.
I drove through Raven Rock.
Yeah, Fort Hiawatha. I don't pronounce that right. That's in Arizona. They tell you there's lower levels. They're very expensive. Tunnel boring machines. They have to have some sort of energy source that's safe, and it ain't no traditional nuclear. Back engineering, ET craft, hugely expensive. You have to create new technologies over the decades to even understand what you're dealing with. Think of vertical integration. They have to do everything themselves. They have to create metamaterials and graphene and nanite technology just to make certain components. I mean, this costs billions and billions and trillions over the years. The secrecy costs a ton of money.
More than the science, a lot more than the science.
The metamaterials are super expensive.
Politicians, you got to pay your subcontractors under contract, national security. Hugely expensive. I met a guy out at Dulles. He was a spooky guy in the aerospace industry. And I said, hey, man, we just met. Talk about synchronicity. And I said, what are you into? And he's like, oh, I'm in the aerospace. And I'm like, do you have a high security clearance? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, let me throw out some terms and see if you and I are on the same page. Anti-gravitics. Yep. Anti-gravity and torsion field plasma accelerator technology. Yep. And on and on and on. He's like, oh, nice to meet you. And then that's it. Never saw each other again. So it tells you, but my point is, out at Dulles, they keep building these giant warehouse buildings, no addresses, no numbers. And my wife used to work for the CIA for years. She's like, oh yeah, that's a lot of that's our stuff, but some of it, I don't know who it is, So they keep building a lot of infrastructure. Most of it's underground. That's hugely expensive. So everyone's like, where our tax dollar goes? My God, the military infrastructure? A general told me in my dad's office, this is 25 years ago, the America can whip every nation on earth combined 10 times over. Military buildup and preparing for war is America's day job. Our GDP, according to Catherine Austin Fitts, is more like 25 to 30 trillion a year. So forget the black budget and forget the 2 trillion in Congress, whatever. That's chicken shit. But we're dealing with vast amounts of money and bank fraud and illegal weapons and drug sales and other more unsavory things to generate the trillions they don't have enough of in our GDP. That makes sense to me, given what I've seen over my lifetime. Everyone's like, where's the money going? I'm like, God, they don't have enough. They're stealing 25 trillion of your money every year. You're paying for this, America. Your tax dollars. And everyone's got a stake in this. They're paying for it, which is another energetic thing. It's like, well, you voted for that congressman and you paid for, your taxes. Unfortunately, that ties you, whether you like it or not, or you knew about it or not, but that ties you to the military, industrial, corporate intelligence complex. And they are all about ET and building black craft. And God knows how many moon bases and asteroids and Mars bases and all that shit. Yeah, Elon Musk going to Mars. They'll do that with all, AI-driven 3D animation. And everyone will buy into it.
Yeah, it's not. They reported 2.3 trillion missing September 10th, 2001. That was the day before 9/11. It's grown to way bigger than that number now.
Drop in the bucket, but they told you.
Yeah.
See the karmic hook? They get off the karmic hook. And then the next day, 9/11.
Well, yeah, and the next day, the budget analyst office got targeted at the Pentagon, and they lost a number of people that were working in the budget analyst office there. So interesting the coincidences. But Donald Rumsfeld
showing the money, Jeremy.
Donald Rumsfeld, did you know that he sat for a decade in the 80s with Dick Cheney on the continuity of government programs, disaster scenario planning think tanks? Their job was to go to Andrews Air Force Base every weekend and plan things just like 9/11, all through the 80s.
Oh, I bet it was really 100 levels below Andrews. I've
Oh,
been
yeah.
there many times with my dad. It's like, when we came back from Russia in 1990, we were on a Codell congressional mission with Bob Dole. Man, I got to go to the Russian Space Agency. This is just as the wall was coming down. And my dad's like, we're going to have to be debriefed, especially what you saw. And I said, really? Wasn't that much, but whatever. And man, they put us in a room and debriefed us for 7 hours. They wanted to know where the hell we, ate, who we met with, what did I see? Did you see this? Did you talk to this Russian general? And I'm like, holy shit. I was a Russian history major at UVA, and so I knew about the culture and the history and the military history of Russia. And people, history's a lie. I'm going to tangent. 27 million, maybe 30 million Russians died in World War II, and the Allies lost 1 million. My new book is about the Gustav gun and its possible atomic shells. Man, just unraveling World War II is why they don't go near it. And the Foo Fighters and all that stuff in World War II, paperclip and all, they don't talk about that, because that's the smoking gun of World War II. All that stuff, I've heard stories they were craning saucers out of the Coral Sea while the Japanese were strafing the Navy. That's how important it was to retrieve crash debris. This goes back to the 20s when they had diving bells in the U.S. Navy.
Mm-hmm.
All the crane ships. There's stories about that. I talked on Dark Journalists about all that stuff. You can watch it there.
John,
insane.
Did you hear anything about a connection between the new radar system and the crashed craft?
Yeah. I've known about that since the 1980s. Somebody wrote about it.
You want to see what the connection is?
Guys at Raytheon, it's like that's longitudinal scalar waves. And if you shorten that frequency, you make it very powerful. You can destabilize an electromagnetic field.
Well, why microwaves? This is literally a radar station without the receiver. It's literally just the output. Pulse microwaves with an amplifier. The reason why we have it here at the lab is because that's what you need for dynamic nuclear orientation in order to make the craft weightless.
Right. Well, remember
those craft are using the same system, and you shoot it at a microwave frequency just off what it needs. Instead of making it weightless, you'll make it heavier, make it crash.
Right. So, the Germans were working on that. Walter Gerlach, all the nonlinear physicists were working on the German radar. The German radar, we're told, was never as good as the British. But it could do some strange things when attached to twin-engine heavy fighters, the Heinkels and whatever. They went out as night fighters and they would point the guns upwards. They called it jazz music. But the radar, they found by mistake that their powerful radars could disrupt the ignition systems of the Allied bombers. That is not in the history books. You have to dig that kind of stuff out from tapping certain people and what they know. But it makes sense given, the U.S. Army has the LRAD sound system. That's based on the German design in World War II, where they have a giant square plate in the back of a heavy truck. And they said, it's crowd control. It's non-lethal. Yeah, until you turn it up to 11, an Army guy told me. He's like, turn up to 11, you can melt people like chocolate. So you talk about scalar wave weapons, directed energy weapons by satellite.
Right.
This goes on forever, man. It gets overwhelming.
What's crazy, John, is the people that when I start talking about the laser induced plasma technologies, and they're able to take talking flashbangs and they can make glowing orbs of light go around and actually talk to you in real time. If you just look up Pentagon talking flashbang, you can find the videos on this. But I was
voice God technology is partially public. People
were like, they would never test that out on live soldiers in South Cal off the bay in a live exercise.
They put live soldiers in front of atomic bomb at Trinity.
They fed radioactive meals to soldiers during World War II to test the effects of radiation on people. Okay,
absolutely. There's no ethics.
No morals.
But you sign on the dotted line. You sign your soul away when you do that, and you get paid. And then 10 years later, you die of radiation. It's sad. I've talked to, I work with wounded veterans twice a year at my farm. We have a black powder deer hunt, and they come with a Marine Corps colonel or sometimes an Air Force general, and they talk about this kind of stuff. We took pills when we were in Iraq, and they told us, they didn't tell us what they were, and now we're all sick. And it has nothing to do with the chemical weapons. And I've had special forces guys telling me, you can't even believe the shit we see, in the skies. They're talking about black craft appearing, firing rounds, and then disappearing.
John, you mentioned the voice of God technology.
Oh, yeah.
I was listening to a Concrete podcast with I think it was Robert Duncan, who's talked about this stuff extensively, right? What the government's capable of, what kind of things they can do, scanning your electromagnetic field, your brain waves, inducing a dopamine dump, by just triggering certain things from a distance. Is there any, with the UFO topic and all this secrecy about mechanical, right? The mechanical secrets, right? All the anti-gravity and whatnot. Are there any conscious consequences or side effects that happen with gravity research? Right, Mark, you mentioned headaches, right? With turning on some of this technology, you have to wear some of these like special clothing. But any conscious, effects from messing around with this stuff, and could that be one of the interesting side effects they'd like to keep under wraps? Could it just be too much? Because even in '53, right, MK Ultra came out. That's when Jack Sarfati got his phone call, right? There's a lot of different things that have happened, since then that deal with brain, with conscious, with that interaction. So are these things connected?
I could talk on Havana syndrome. I got hit by that once.
Really?
Yeah. Simultaneously, they hacked my phone and put a gun in my Amazon checkout thing, and it was.
Well, that's like a whole targeted individual thing. That's
yeah. It happened right here at the lab. We had a visiting scientist over who was.
I don't even talk about half the stuff that's happened to me because it's like people accuse me of lying and making it up when I do. So I just ignore it and move on. So it's like,
and then they threatened to abduct my daughter and take her on a time machine. Oh, it was crazy shit.
That's crazy.
Yeah, they broke into my apartment.
Crazy.
Stole my computers. So.
The goal is to discourage you from doing the science. So like,
yeah, I have for 7 years now. I've had a mysterious flu-like symptoms that come and go with alarming speed. I have metal parts in my spine after a racing accident, so I have paresthesia everywhere. But now, in the last 7 years, I've gotten strange bouts of severe nausea for like a day, and then the next day I feel fine, and then ringing in the ears, which also relates to paresthesia, and the doctors can find nothing wrong with me. I said, my God, I've been up all night with fevers, sweating and everything. I go into the doctor's office, he's like, all right. And they take my blood and they do the whole thing. And it's like, we found nothing.
Yeah.
I'm older.
That's very common with, as far as what I can tell from the research, it's very common with these.
Last 10 years.
I've had that happen to me several times. One time, directed energy weapon. We got them on camera. We got license plate numbers. It was a rental car. It was during COVID, so there was a parking lot across the street. They were parked there, aiming the weapon through the door. The next time it happened to me was I didn't have my equipment grounded properly.
That's when you had that NASA scientist there, right? Amy Eskridge was there.
Amy Eskridge, yes. That's when that happened. The second time it happened was when I didn't have my equipment properly grounded. X-band microwaves, when the wavelength is about that long, that's the length of many of your neuron pathways. And I felt just like you felt. Nausea comes on really fast. You feel like you have a fever and stuff.
Fatigue at the yin yang, like you can't even get out of bed. Fatigue for no reason.
Yeah, and then it's gone. A day, and then it's just gone. And that's when we made tinfoil hats, PPE at the lab. And it goes away.
Really?
Yeah. And if you have those problems again, when you should get yourself a silver mesh cloth. It'll cost you like $150. Cover yourself in it, and that'll protect you from EM waves.
No one talks about these.
I do that.
No one talks about these attacks or these symptoms or anything. I think the more people that talked about them,
well, they think you're making up stories. I mean,
100%.
People. I mean, all the stuff we're talking about is out of most people's wheelhouse by a factor of 1,000. they're like, oh, these nuts, and they just want to.
Well, thankfully, something is changing, because I heard about this first through the news, the Havana syndrome symptoms that were being talked about, right? And then I looked into it, and I found out, from like Gary Nolan and stuff, that he was doing research into it. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but some of the people who were reporting symptoms of Havana syndrome and were confirmed to have some kind of damage from that experience, right? Neurological damage, or some kind of effect happened. They were lumped together early on with experiencers and remote viewers, the brain scans of those people. And they were like, well, they being the government, handed this pile of information onto Nolan, I think Christopher Green, and had them figure it out. And they were able to easily separate the Havana syndrome victims versus the people who were remote viewing or having psychic experiences, or in some cases even seeing craft or beings, right? And so, the similarities there are very interesting. But what Gary Nolan then goes on to describe, even in these podcasts on the SALT conference, is that these so-called entities from wherever they are, some higher dimension or whatever, are, interacting with people through their sensory data, like through their sensory input. But it's coming in these very vague, almost like intuitions, or even through dreams, like these strange experiences, which I think Havana syndrome shows the same methodology, but more like really, rough, right? There's something else going on where they're forcing, the brain to do certain stuff through. Yeah. And then what Duncan talks about is the technology is all there. It's all present. You can do it.
The CIA's MK Ultra program, they had 168 sub-projects. They spent decades and billions of dollars trying to control the human mind and understand how human brains work and all that stuff. So,
and who knows who briefed them on it?
Yeah, and well, that's the other thing too. Is oh man, there's some cool stuff coming out too. Danny's just interviewed the guy. I think he's got an interview coming out real soon, Danny Jones podcast, with the guy who worked on a lot of the stuff. And he's talking about the device that the neuralizer device and the Men in Black, that they have something that could actually basically erase your memory or make you forget everything. It's kind of like,
they could do it with a high intensity magnetic or electromagnetic impulses.
How would that work, man? I would just.
Well, they prevent the brain from etching it in through this.
Call it blank slate.
Weird.
Because Bob Lazar tells the story. I think it's Bob, about going on the Janet airliner to Area 51.
He drink the weird liquid, right? That was in Valet's book. Was he psyoped, right?
Yeah, but he said the workers coming from Area 51. When they go home at night on the Janet jet, they can't remember what they worked on that day. And it's only when they go back to Area 51 on the jet that the memories come back.
Yeah, that's weird, man.
It sounds like hypnosis too, right?
No, it's electronic, he said.
Really?
It's what you were talking about. Everything's electromagnetic, I think, but it's one of these technologies
work like
they got from ET. And I can tell you, my dad came back from Iraq on a military jet, and from I don't know where, he didn't tell me, Fallujah or something. This is like 93. And he said they were taking missile fire and they were popping flares and there were M16s and everything. And he said the flight home, I said, did you fall asleep? And he said, it's the strangest thing. I have a hard time sleeping on planes, but I slept the whole way home and I don't remember anything about the flight. And I never thought of anything about that strange story you told me. And now I'm wondering if they blank slated the hell out of them. Senators and military generals did their job, went to a black site, saw what they needed to saw, and then they went home and they zipped their memory off. I think it's very true technology. It's the least of our issues. It's the least.
That's wild.
Everything under the sun. It's amazing all of us are even talking about this, or there's just a disclosure movement at all. I would think there has to be a benevolent ET equation in this, because otherwise we'd all be talking about the World Cup and muscle cars.
True. It's on our minds.
I mean, it's like
patents on it too.
Yeah, I mean,
I've seen some of those. Yeah,
they can't control the whole narrative. They can try, but they won't do it. So I think we're getting some down low help from several groups, but it's very subtle. It's like, we're still alive. Hey, I mean, why not just kill everyone? Why not just mind control everyone so they don't talk about UFOs or ETs at all?
Right. Yeah, I know. They could just.
I'll bet you they've tried, and it doesn't work because they don't understand the human mind, your aura, your soul, all that well. They know enough about it to do their military technologies with it. I don't know. You tell me. Super Soldier program. The U.S. Army admitted they're in a program.
Yeah.
You know,
that was
public.
That was like the basis of Captain America. He was like,
yeah, I don't watch those movies, but yeah, I've heard of it. And
well,
it's like,
no, the original comic book.
oh, really?
The Captain America #1 is they gave steroids to this soldier at a super soldier program to fight the Nazis, and yeah, that's what Captain America was. It was steroids.
There's stories when I'm digging out the SS and the occult. I have to go to some very esoteric sources, and none of it I can prove, but it's like, you know, the relics are there, the castles and the weird death camps and everything.
Thule Society.
Supposedly they were into cloning and genetic engineering, and it has to do with super soldiers. And I wrote this into my latest book, Sanity Was a Luxury. And that Mengele had a program where, starting in the early 30s, they would take Aryan German women, you know, very tough, strong, young women, impregnate them with certain, you know, whatever sperm, and then they would beat the crap out of them at regular intervals. And supposedly the energetic trauma and everything went into the baby. And when that baby was born and put into the Hitler Youth program, they were absolutely the toughest of the toughest psychopaths. And I think it's been corroborated by some testimony of former Hitler Youth people. They were like, yeah, it was strange how tough some people were. They were just unbreakable. Now, I don't know. That's a wild story. But given everything else about the Nazis and their involvement in the occult and genetics, God knows, ET, you tell me, you know, it's not so wild.
In the context of that, no, it's not wild. Not at all. Yeah, what they were doing over there.
People think it is. It's Nazis in Antarctica on the moon.
Dude, they've done genetic programs and stuff like that in the U.S. There's a movie called 3 Perfect Strangers.
Right.
Go watch that sometime.
Yep. They've been doing the boys in Brazil, cloning. I mean, this stuff has been out there. It's just science fiction, folks.
Who's the doctor that was obsessed with twins, right? Wasn't it Mengele?
Yeah.
Okay, Mengele, right? Like, I always think about that. It's just, you know, I think about it in terms of the study of metaphysics as well, right? If someone was trying to figure out.
Oh, they do. He was an occultist. He was an SS.
Right. And then the idea of having these two different beings with the same identical genetics, the kinds of research that could be done about consciousness, and I think it would be wild. And you got to wonder, why was he so obsessed? So yeah, the idea of them getting into cloning and all that stuff seems.
Well, I think he was privy to some very esoteric information and maybe some ancient information. Remember that the SS had the Reich Tibet Institute, and they brought in all these monks, and they were going through the Kongshur and some other obscure texts for any kind of technological Anunnaki stuff and stuff like that. But Mengele was interested in twins because they had enlarged pineal glands.
Really?
Why twins are psychic. You know, you separate them at birth, but one's on the East Coast and one's on the West Coast, but they talk. And then they meet and they're like, oh, I knew you all my life. Well, there's a story, and I can't prove it, but I heard from a couple of guys and I talked with FDR in the late 30s got wind of this Nazi program. And they said, shit, we're way behind the Nazis on everything. And so the story is out in Arlington, Virginia, right over here, they got a warehouse, and Army G2 intelligence was in charge. And they heard the Soviets were building a, quote, psychic army. I don't know how many, but given the Russians, maybe a couple thousand. But the army was working with 100 people, and most of them were twins.
No shit.
We had very good U.S. Navy spies in Germany in the 30s and during the war. It's incredible. Even at Peenemünde, we had a Navy O&I guy spy. That's how good the Navy O&I spy ring was. Trying to dig that out. The Navy doesn't want to talk about it still. Why can't we divulge secrets from World War II? That was 80 years ago. They're still keeping all this stuff secret because it relates directly to today.
Yep. That's the only reason they wouldn't talk about it. Is because
IG Farben, the chemical laser, isotope purification, red mercury, all this stuff, nonlinear physics. And all these scientists come out and they say, it's all bullshit. Well, thanks a lot. Who's paying you, motherfucker? Assholes. I mean, I've talked to these, it's like Ron Pandolfi. He's on this private forum and he's like, we don't have any of that shit. I'm like, you work for the CIA. You're a physicist that works for the CIA. I don't believe a word that comes out of your mouth.
He's head of the weird desk. I know that.
He's like, oh, you don't understand. I'm like, I understand perfectly. It's ridiculous. The cover, that's what I'm saying. The cover stories and security cost billions and billions and billions.
Last of the finest says he sees a lot of posturing here, but no real firsthand knowledge. Bro, we got more firsthand knowledge than any of these frauds you see pretending to be UFO whistleblowers and insiders.
They're never going to interview him in a hearing on Congress.
They would never interview me in the knowledge that I know and have put together. Here's a technical summary I put together on UAP. You can find this on my channel. I have a presentation of this. You have Lawrence Krauss, a theoretical physicist. He's doing a UFO debate, and he picks Nick Pope for his partner. Like, don't these people do any research into who's the physicists inside this community and who knows the physics? Like, why don't theoretical physicists talk to me and other members of the physics community that actually can talk real physics and real technology, real engineerables? Hard. This is all backed up with papers and documents and studies.
I'm sorry. Would you go back a few slides? There was an antenna that looked like a fractal. Okay,
yeah, right, the fractals.
You see that? Part of my work for my books is I was digging out all this esoteric stuff about the Freemasons and cathedral building.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of churches in Europe and Turkey and Asia and everything, they have these weird antennas, and they're based on fractal technology. Gee whiz, what do the Freemasons know? They know all the ancient Egyptian mystery school information about ancient physics, this stuff. And it's right there in front of your eyes, but few have the eyes to see. And they're looking, there's clever people did all these videos on these antennas on churches and spires and these gold globes. It's like, why do they put all this junk on the top of churches?
Yeah, the lattice, even like the lattices that they have around some of those towers.
Cymatic with the windows and the cymatics of sound theory. Physicist Eric Dollard said, he told me over the phone, he said, cathedrals are analog waveform generators.
That's right. How often do you talk to Eric Dollard?
Right.
Eric Dollard's a genius.
Yeah, he's a genius. And he gets no credit because he's a hippie.
Well, he also says he has some pretty far out ideas. Like I love his breakdown of the sun being hollow and that the sunspots kind of reveal that there's like nothing inside there. It's a transformer bringing energy from some other place. It's just an off the wall theory, but it's that kind of stuff that's really interesting. But Eric Dollard has like a really comprehensive, in-depth video on YouTube about the history of electrical engineering. And
all this UFO stuff is high voltage.
Absolutely.
How about this? 1913, the first electric-powered planes and stuff. Luigi Rota experimenting with this stuff with Edward Farrow back in the early 19th century.
That looks like stuff from the Aero Club.
Yeah, the 1897 airship mystery. I mean, they were using plasma in a gas tubes, and they were electrical powered. Some of them had propulsion propellers, air screws on the rear. Well, they were powered by electricity because they were generating it using plasma. And, Walter Bosley found documents, he's brilliant, that showed a bell-like structure, and they're dripping some sort of serum on it, which is probably, most likely, red mercury of some sort. Really? That's alchemy from the 19th century. Alchemy is, biochemistry and electrical, stuff. The consciousness of the person doing the alchemical experiment, that's the philosopher's stone. You're tapping into higher consciousness, the universal consciousness, to solve a problem.
Can you go back to the Maxwell's equations one? Were you saying that there's a third field involved?
No. Well, this is a whole thing with gem theory, and that's all covered in Brandenburg stuff. See the Banduric lectures on the APEC conference, man. We go deep into this. I don't have time. We're over 3 hours now, and I actually have to leave now and get to work and get some stuff done. but yeah, this is all stuff that we've covered here on this channel, man. This is shadow banned and blocked from the mainstream, and people like I've already gone over a lot of this stuff, and we have discussions on these types of topics all the time. Talking about UFO medals, the analysis that was done, some of the work on. I did a whole investigation of cold fusion. I went to MIT to the colloquium conferences and the IAP courses and recorded those with the presentations from all these scientists. Half these guys in this picture are probably dead now, and I have all this stuff saved. All this this is tons of like detailed, like years of technical research and information that's been it's doesn't need security clearance because it's security by obscurity. Nobody knows about it.
Yeah.
It's
very difficult to understand some of it.
Yeah, it is. But this is, if people do want to learn it and do want to understand it and get into it, then they're welcome to, jump on board and take this further. I have enough material here to keep your physics professors busy for the next 2 years if they haven't seen this stuff. So, send them my way, send them to, this presentation. I'll do a link to this whole presentation in the description below. I'll have an updated version of this. I should do an updated version of this because it's been almost a year since I've done a presentation on this, and I have more stuff too to add. So I'll definitely see what I can do about putting more information and stuff out there and put it together. But I appreciate everyone who joined, and Jeremiah looks like just joined here too, man. Thank you.
Subscribe, everyone. There's more people watching now than there are likes on this video. Well, let's get some likes and subscriptions going on here.
Hit that like button. Hit
that's CIA.
And I made that post on Twitter. I made that post on Twitter saying, Grush gets on here and he can't talk about anything. I got security clearances and this and that. It's like, well, I don't have security clearances, and I've done way more investigation and research than any of these guys have. Get me on the show, and I can drop more technical information with hard facts and verifiable sources in 20 minutes than David Grush, Elizondo, and Bob Lazar have dropped in their entire internet history. And that is a fact.
That's why they won't have you.
That is a fact, and that's why they won't have me. And people wanted to talk all kinds of crap on that Twitter post and say, "Oh yeah, well, why don't you post it here?" And I have. You get it, man.
Jeremy, could you tell us all again where we can find this dossier that you're showing?
Okay, so this is called if you just go to Alien Scientist on YouTube and go to the search button, you can look up a UAP technical briefing, and let's find that video here so people can go and see that. Yeah, so I got to go watch this Voices from DARPA thing later too. I want to save that. That would look cool. So yeah, you go to Alien Scientist here. You have to click the search. You won't find this. You could try to find these videos using a YouTube search. Guarantee you spell the whole thing out by name and you will not find the video. It's so shadow banned. But if you go to my channel and you type in UFO briefing, right? UAP briefing. Yeah. This one will work, or this one. Either one of these, or any one of these three. This has my presentation in it. It makes it when I presented it on APEC. But any one of these three will have that presentation I was just showing with a complete overview of all those technologies and subjects. And that's kind of like a summary of a lot of the research that we've done over the last 20 years, just all summed in one place. If people want, the shortened access version, and then any one of those topics can be delved into with other 2 or 5 hour videos that I have on those topics individually. So there's disclosure, in my opinion, has already happened, and we just need people to sort of come around to it and get on board with.
Well, that's the issue is the general public. I mean, when I post videos like yours or whatever that's very technical and scientific, man, you get it like 10 likes, and then they want to be entertained by kitty cats and flying saucers and Bigfoot and
little green men. That's it.
It's really sad. I mean,
Well, anyways, we're changing all that, and we're bringing some happiness to the sadness, hopefully. And thank you all for your support. Make sure you smash that like button on the way out. Help with that algorithm. I don't know how we have 300 people watching and not 300 likes on this video. So please You can't. It costs you nothing to hit that like button, and also go share this video on Twitter, on Rumble, or on any other platform that you truth on. So, again, thank you all for the
Bye, guys. It was great.
show. Thank you,
Bye.
John, for a
Bye,
fantastic
Long
discussion.
and prosper.
Thank
Live
you,
long,
Mark.
prosper, and eat green juice.
Yeah, and follow Tupacabra on UFO Twitter.
Absolutely.
All right. Later, guys.
Later, guys.